Husker Nation, congratulations. We're going to have to go to the record books, see the last time Nebraska was above 500 in the Big Ten. And, of course, on Mickey Joseph, 2-0 in the Big Ten. But as it counts for the 2022 season, Nebraska breaks on top of the Western Division in the Big Ten. This is how topsy-turvy the Big Ten is in the Western Division side in 2022, is that we've got now play in October, and we've got Nebraska, who has looked at times much of the season like the worst team in the Big Ten Western Division, Northwestern aside. But look at the head-to-head. It goes Northwestern's way, of course, going all the way back to August. That Nebraska has looked like the worst team in the Big Ten West at times, and lo and behold, they're in first place, albeit until most likely tomorrow, of course, alone in first place. But congratulations, Nebraska, hanging on for a clear your throat, scintillating performance in Piscataway, defeating Rutgers 14-13. Welcome into the Voice of College Football Nebraska postgame live. So what's happened tonight is we've had the convergence of the regular call-in show that we do each and every Friday night here at the Voice of College Football post-game show for the landscape of college football and College Football Nation here on the main channel, converging with our Nebraska postgame live that we provide after every Huskers game. We've done it now for, all of last season, this season included, so 12 games last year. And then, of course, where's Nebraska right now? Is that 6 games into the season here, so 18 consecutive games for Nebraska, most of them losing efforts. Let's see, Nebraska would be now 3-6-12 in our postgame show era here at the Voice of College Football, but they get the win tonight. Therefore, we welcome in actually the rest of College Football Nation into our Nebraska postgame show. So Nebraska fans, this is the way it works. This is your show first and foremost. So we'll talk Nebraska, Rutgers, and of course focus on the Huskers first and foremost, and we will talk all of college football. But our guy Christian Hunt was not able to do postgame tonight for Nebraska. He is our weekly host of postgame here at the Voice of College Football, GBR. And therefore, you are stuck with me tonight hosting the Nebraska postgame live. 14-13 over Rutgers. Again, we will scurry to the record books to find out the last time Nebraska was over 500 in Big Ten play. I'm almost positive I would not put my mortgage on the line. Maybe I would, since I sold my house. Mortgage on the line that it would have been during the Scott Frost era. No, I don't believe so. They always got off to horrible starts and horrible finishes under Scott Frost in the Big Ten. So it would have to be all the way back to one of the Mike Riley teams, probably the second to last team that went 9-4. You know, I love the numbers and love to see the last time such and such happened. So we're going to have to look that up. To the here and now. Rutgers on the opening drive marched down the field for a touchdown. That's been the Nebraska defense this season, making even Rutgers look good. 6 plays for 75 yards for the Scarlet Knights at home against the Huskers. There's a 3-point underdog. Shameen Jones, 33-yard reception was the big play on the drive from Noah Vedral, of course. College football fans, you remember him from Nebraska, where he started his career. Rutgers blocked punt, courtesy Max Melton, brother of Bo Melton. We remember a star a few years ago at Rutgers. Parker Day returned it to the Nebraska 9. But in Rutgers fashion, after the block punt, got to convert that into a touchdown. You've got first and goal at the 9, and Rutgers offense showed up, meaning they didn't show up. The Rutgers offense showed up, meaning offense did not show up. and it was 10-0. Then it was later 13-0. Christian Braswell had a really good interception in which he somewhat baited Casey Thompson on the play down the right sideline. Trey Palmer was the intended receiver, and it was 13-0. Nebraska making a lot of mistakes. One drive in particular, getting the ball on its own end. Trey Palmer was open for a long gainer, if not a touchdown, all the way down the field. Casey Thompson could not get the ball out soon enough, quick enough, or long enough down the right sideline. Underthrew him. Palmer actually came back to catch the ball, but you can't throw the guy down. Offensive pass interference, followed by a false start. And that punt sequence led Rutgers to good field position and another field goal at 13-0 at the half. Huskers came out. There was a span of exactly 7 consecutive fruitless drives for the Nebraska offense. And that's been, of course, the one selling portion of this team has been the offensive side this season. But they do go 9 plays, 70 yards. Travis Vogelek with the touchdown reception to make it 13-7. 3 interceptions by Nebraska, all proved to be very important because you had one by Brandon Moore, which stopped a Rutgers drive at the Nebraska 37. You had Miles Farmer with a pick that led directly to the Nebraska touchdown drive. That was all of 27 yards. So Miles Farmer gets the pick off Evan Simon, sets up at the 27. Nebraska scores in one play. Trey Palmer, much like the Indiana game last week at Nebraska at Memorial Stadium, where we had a 21-all game in the fourth quarter. Casey Thompson goes up top to Trey Palmer. He beats the secondary. The one-on-one man-on-man coverage was blasted, and he burns the dude for the touchdown to break open the game and give Nebraska the lead last week en route to a win. Same thing this week. Trey Palmer up top, 27 yards, burns his man. And obviously a huge play once again for Trey Palmer. That's why they got him from LSU, 14-13. And then Nebraska got the football in its own end, inside its own 10. So Rutgers with a perfect opportunity with about 5 minutes left in the game to stop Nebraska, get the punt back, great field position, only needing a field goal, 14-13. But you had a conversion to Travis Vogelek on 3rd and 7 that they completed. They get it out to midfield. They had a couple of running plays on 3rd down that converted to first downs, despite Nebraska having difficulty running against Rutgers. Improved Scarlet Knight defense. They can stop the bad teams in the Big Ten. Even a team with an offense like Nebraska has shown this season, most of the season. And then finally, they did stop Nebraska on the holding penalty that went to the sideline, even though there was a key pickup where Casey Thompson, 3rd and 7, hit Vogelek on the slant to extend the drive. That was huge because there's 4 minutes left. They're going to have to punt from their own 5-10 yard line. They didn't. They pick up the first down on the slant route. They punted out to midfield, but that didn't happen. Of course, Rutgers did not get the stop until later, get the ball back with about 2 minutes left. Evan Simon with a pick by Malcolm Hartzog, who clinched the victory for Nebraska, 14-13 Nebraska. All right, we invite all of you and your calls. And again, so here's the deal, Nebraska fans. If you want to talk Huskers victory, call me. Call me and leave comments in the live chat as well. Not that you have to call. You're not used to the call-in show. Post-game, I know that. So we will be looking for your comments, but I'm here first and foremost to answer your questions concerning Nebraska football and the road ahead at 2-1 in the Big Ten. Look at that, 2-1 in the Big Ten. And then, of course, we're going to take the calls here. So first and foremost, the priority, let's see if we've got our Nebraska folks on the line. Then we'll hit the calls. And man, we've got some comments coming in here. Go Blue. Yes, let's get Nebraska people in here. Where are you? Where are you, Nebraska people? What you got? I'll be looking for you. Yes, Odyssey, thank you so much for updating the score for us. We've got an update from City Field by David Knight. Okay, Padres win. Gotcha. We will run down the scoreboard, of course, later All right, all right, all right. And please, yes, like the video, like the video. All right, I'll be looking for Nebraska content there in the chat. Meanwhile, we got Hunter on the line to talk college football tonight. Lead us off. Hunter, what's going on?
How's it going, Mark? Hey, can you hear me?
Sure.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. How you doing?
Hey, good. Um, that was an interesting game. I didn't think Nebraska would be able to pull it off there at the end, but
They were playing Rutgers, Hunter. They were playing
true.
Rutgers.
But given Nebraska's
Oh, I agree with you. I got you.
so, but I got a good friend of mine who's a big Nebraska fan, so I was happy for him to be able to get the win for his team. Do you think that Mickey Joseph has a chance of becoming the permanent head coach?
Yes. I believe he's got a chance. We're going to weigh that chance at. So, first of all, they've got to look like they've got some life. They've got to look like he can run a football program, like he's going to motivate and be the guy that can lead a football program and that the team responds to, plus has, his ducks in order in terms of organization, time management, game management, personnel, organization, and all of that in line. Yes, he's going to have to show that. I don't think the expectations are going to be unreasonable, but considering how bad the Big Ten Western Division is, that I don't think that he can just show that, okay, they're a little bit better than they were before. So let's see. He's going to have the ship for, I believe, 8 games. So if he goes 4-4, I don't necessarily, knowing what that's going to look like against that division, I don't necessarily know that they're going to say, okay, he's proven that he's our guy. They fired Scott Frost to win. So I think he's going to have to show a little bit more than that, unless they're just extremely impressed with the way he runs the program outside of what we see on the field. And that could be the case.
Didn't he play at Nebraska? Or
Yes.
I'm confused. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, I don't know if I was confusing that with somebody else.
Absolutely.
So that might be in his favor a little bit. I don't know. I mean, we already tried the experiment of having a former player be the head coach. So I don't know if that's going to score him any points as far as maybe getting the permanent job. But I do want to transition to something right quick before I get off. Are you confident with Jalen Milroe of what you've seen last week to be able to lead Alabama to a uh, a victory? Put it that way. But do you think that he's a capable quarterback after what you've seen last week?
I trust the entire process there. So this is what I mean by that, is that I didn't necessarily see enough in 9 pass attempts to know that Jalen Milroe can do it against top 3 or 4 defense in the SEC that he's going to face on Saturday. However, there's a reason he was recruited, signed, all of that, and then not just buried 5 quarterbacks deep on the depth chart, but the number 2 guy. So he's the number 2 guy at Alabama for a reason. Now, we saw him run like the wind. We saw him outrun the Arkansas secondary, but getting back to the passing portion of it. So obviously the game plan and the plays called and the plays that feature him, that's going to be decidedly different than what we would see with a Bryce Young offense. So they're going to play to his strengths. But what I trust is, again, the process from Nick Saban on down and everyone supporting him all week and them crafting a game plan that, number 1 is run heavy, Jahmyr Gibbs and company. Number 2 is more than that, being able to determine, and I'm sure they already know, what pass plays he is most comfortable with, the type of throws, and again, the type of plays with what personnel and the whole deal, that they will craft a game plan that's going to be limited, but it's going to suit him. And that's going to make him look good.
Well, after talking to I'm subscribed to a couple of different Alabama pages on different various of the websites and everything. But everything that I've heard from him, and even I follow recruiting very closely, so I'm familiar with him as a recruit. But he does have a cannon. But I think um, he is run first, throw later type of a quarterback, kind of like a Jalen Hurts. You didn't see Jalen Hurts come along with a passer until he got to Oklahoma, where he kind of threw the ball a little bit more in that kind of a Lincoln Riley type of offense. And you got to keep in mind, this was the guy that was committed to Texas when Sarkisian took over, and then ended up flipping his commitment to Alabama. So, if Sark really liked him as a quarterback, then um, you got to put some stock into that as well, because of how good of an offensive mind he is. But I have confidence in Jalen, and I think we win the game by at least 2 touchdowns. I just don't see this A&M team being able to score. Um, and they got a good secondary, but we'll kind of see what happens tomorrow night.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Anything else, sir?
Real quick, the Tennessee game. What's your kind of a read on that game?
I think it's a toss-up in Death Valley. I think that LSU actually has, in some ways, a better team. They've got a better defense than Tennessee does. I watched them again last week against Auburn, saw most of that game, and I just think, wow, that LSU defense, boy, they have some dudes that can just run people down, close on the football, come off the edge. They're really good. And Tennessee, there's still a difference between playing in the West and playing in the East, and we know what that's been over the last 10 plus years. So you take probably the second best team in the East, maybe the third best team in the East, but right there against a run-of-the-mill team in the West. And I just think that John Emery's going to have a nice game against the Tennessee defense, and he should. They had a bad defense last year. It's much improved this year, but I don't know that it's improved that much to where the defensive comparison goes LSU's way in a huge way. The offensive talent is comparable, but Tennessee's they have a second full season coming up under Josh Heupel's system. They've got a more consistent quarterback. They've got a more established running game. Everything Tennessee's offense is well-oiled. It's one of the best 10 offenses in the country versus LSU still trying to figure out what they do well. And when I see them operate like they had to against Florida State when Jaden Daniels had to be the entire offense, that's why I say John Emery needs to supplement that, and he needs to have a big game because Jaden Daniels cannot carry a team to a win. And I'm not saying that he can't deliver the key passes and key runs to do it, but he can't be the guy that runs it 18 times and throws it 35 times, and he's got the ball in his hands every play like he did against Florida State and win against a really good team. So I do favor Tennessee's place where they are as a team over where LSU is. They just got their act together more, but LSU is certainly capable of winning this game. And again, probably has better overall talent on the entire team, both sides of the ball.
I just think there's some dysfunctionality with LSU right now.
Sure.
But I slightly lean Tennessee in this game. And it's on a scale 1 to 10, it's probably a 6 on how strong I think about favor Tennessee in this game. I think it can go either way, but I think Tennessee's got the more offensive power to score. And you just don't know what Jaden Daniels are going to get week to week, so And you're right. LSU definitely has a better overall talent roster from a pure talent standpoint. Um, there's just some internal things right now that are hindering them. So anyway, I know you got other people on the line, so uh, um, I will. I'll probably talk to you at some point tomorrow.
Thanks, Hunter. Appreciate it. Enjoy the
Bye.
games. So once again, Nebraska fans, we apologize that we don't have our dedicated Nebraska show and host Christian Hunter. Christian Hunt with you tonight. I was looking in Hunter's name, obviously, our last caller, but Christian Hunt with you. So we're combining what we typically do here at the Voice of College Football with our call-in show on Friday night after the ball games with our Nebraska postgame. So Nebraska fans, I would ask that you would leave any comments or questions that you have that you want addressed in the chat, and that you would also call. We will leave the link once again in the chat, but it's at the beginning of the chat. I'll leave it back in the chat here so you can join the show and we can talk Nebraska football with all of you. Meanwhile, as we take calls, we are previewing week 6, and we've got Ben on the line. Ben, how you doing?
Hey, pretty good. How are you doing, Mark?
I am doing just fine. What's going on?
So I am not particular. I had a question or I wanted a comment, but it's not particularly a Nebraska comment. But it's about that game. When I was watching it, I was wondering if you, and this is the question I'm going to ask you, and I've seen this not just this game, but for the Big Ten in general. What did you think about the officiating for that game? I thought it was terrible. And I've seen some games that I've rewatched this year that were just terrible. Like the Maryland, if you rewatch the Michigan-Maryland game, they didn't make bad calls. They just didn't call anything. The whole game, there were so many things. And on both sides. I'm a Michigan fan, but on both sides. I mean, like the things by Michigan and things by Maryland's formations were like, there were so many illegal formations or men downfield, illegal men downfield, rewatching that. And this game I thought was terrible.
All right. So you get to a number of things here because most fans, when they bring up officiating and they're being neutral, they're not saying, my team got screwed, but they're just saying that was a horribly officiated game. Typically go to two areas, and they go to defensive pass interference, whether they think it was too ticky-tack or that they think that guys got away with murder out there. And then the other one would be offensive holding, particularly on pass plays, that the offensive line was holding and getting away with holds, or that they were being, again, too ticky-tack in calling the holds. That's typically where we go with those, because those are judgment calls. Now, in terms of missing technical calls, that's what you're pointing out right here. That's a technical call. If the officials do not recognize that's an illegal formation, and which basically means there's a few things that come up.
5 guys in the backfield, like tight ends back when the tight end should be on the line and things like that. Yeah.
There's the first thing you learn when understanding football rules is that the formations, they're going way back a zillion years, determined that players in the backfield are not necessarily what we consider as football fans players in the backfield, meaning like they're tailbacks. Just anybody off the line of scrimmage is in the backfield, and you have to have at least 6 players on the line of scrimmage. That's why we see it a number of times where wide receivers get it wrong, where they're illegally in formation.
Also a lot of people don't understand.
And obviously the only guys that can go out for a pass have to be either in the backfield or they have to be the end men on the line of scrimmage. So you're saying you saw those things. I wasn't watching the formations intently to know if they were missing calls like that, but I'm saying I would be pretty surprised and appalled if they were missing that.
Well, there was a couple of them. I was like, there was 5 men in the backfield and they ran the same play twice where there's 5 men in the backfield. 2 of the receivers were off. There's a quarterback, and then the tight end was back. And I was like, those are things that you see that tells the defense who's eligible and who's not too. I mean, people might think it's like, it's just a formational thing. It doesn't take doesn't make, but when you're the defense, that tells you who's eligible. It's
Sure.
not like when you're playing backyard ball and you tackle backyard ball and you raise your hand if you're eligible or something, or if you're eligible or something like that. But yeah, I mean, but this game, man, I thought it's, now when I looked at this game, I didn't notice formations, but I usually notice that if I rewatch a game because I got a little bit more time. But this game, I noticed like that last interception, they were calling ticky-tacky like offensive and defensive or offensive pass interference, I think, this game. And in that last interception, the DB like pushes the wide receiver like in the back and pushes off from to get to the interception. I mean, did it? I mean, that's what I saw when I watched it. And I thought that was kind of like the whole night. I mean, there was a couple people in the comments like I think Ralph Wolf was mentioning that he thought that Rutgers should have been 24-0 in that game if it wasn't for bad calls. So what did you see?
Yeah, I got to say I didn't really see any of that. I'm not saying that it wasn't there. I'm saying I watched the game, had the game on, watched the plays, kept track of, okay, who's doing what, but I wasn't watching the game to that extent to have that type of analysis of the game. I didn't even see the interception more than once. I saw it happen. I was setting up here, saw it happen, and I haven't seen the replay of the interception to see. I do think that Trey Palmer, if you're alluding as well to the Trey Palmer offensive pass interference, I thought that was a good call. Threw the guy down.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Said something about offensive pass interference.
I think they called like 4 or 5 of them. I think they called like 4 or 5 offensive pass interferences that game.
4 or 5?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. At least 4.
Okay.
But anyways, that's what I wanted to shout out at you. I just wondered what your thoughts were on it. So that's all.
Well,
that's all I had for you.
Say that the last 2 weeks, Nebraska has played in just. First of all, they're a penalized team. Period. They've been a penalized team under Scott Frost, and Indiana and Nebraska totaled like 1 million penalties last week. Some ridiculous, like more penalties. I think in the first half. I don't know where it landed at the conclusion of the game, but they had more penalties in the first half than any game in like 5 years or something like that.
Really?
And I see that Nebraska and Rutgers, 18 penalties in this game, 9 apiece. That's
an interesting stat. That's not what you want when you're a coach of a team. That's for sure.
No, I heard a coach make the comment the other day. I'm trying to think who that was, that he likes his team to be not the least penalized or the most penalized because he thinks that there's a lot of penalties that are out of aggression, that if you play an aggressive style of play, you're going to get some penalties. So he has no issue with his team having some penalties. So he doesn't want his team to be the least penalized team in the nation. But he says we should be in kind of the upper third in least penalties. And that's a good sign for that coach, whoever said that.
Yeah. What did you think of? Did you see that thrown out of bounds play?
Yes, I don't like that.
I thought that was a little call. I thought, man, that was so quick. I mean, they were just going out, and I think he was just finishing his motion. But
so
I don't think he even threw him down. I think he was just in the middle of trying to get him out of bounds.
So from the standpoint of these officials have to understand the context of the game. So there are the officials, and this is probably most of them, that just simply know this is the rule book, and I call the play. If it's the first play of the game, I'm going to call that. If it's 28-27 and the ball's at the 3-yard line and the pass is in the end zone to decide the game, I'm calling that exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with that from the standpoint of talking about actual football plays, clipping, holding, pass interference, actual, what I consider plays that are infractions within the play. But when you talk about taunting, unsportsmanlike conduct, a late hit, a play out of bounds like that, those are more periphery calls or non-play calls, false starts, that sort of thing. And I know you can differentiate those last two as well. So for me, I would tend to evaluate the game in context. So for example, if I saw a lot of jawing and taunting's illegal.
Mm-hmm.
It's a call. It's a 15-yard penalty. It's a big deal. Okay, it can really hurt a team. It can end a drive, elongate a drive. It's a 15-yard penalty. If it's the first quarter and I'm an official who's saying, this has got the potential to be a rough game, a physical game, out of control game, we could have some issues here. I'm calling that. I'm calling it by the letter. It's not my rule book. It's the rule book. It's not my decision to determine whether taunting should be in the rule book or not. So I'm going to enforce that. And I also want to set a tone for the rest of the game. Communicate to the players, this is the way we're going to officiate the game. This is the way you need to behave yourself during the game. But as we saw in Purdue-Syracuse a couple of weeks ago, I thought this was horrible that Purdue scores with 45 seconds left in the game. Great game. 45 seconds left in the game. Purdue scores. There is minimal jawing between a Purdue player, Payne Durham, the tight end who scored the lead touchdown, and the Syracuse player. And I couldn't even, watching it on TV, I couldn't even determine who started what. It was just kind of like a push, like not a push, like I'm throwing you 5 yards, like a chest bump and some jawing back and forth. Okay, flag comes out, 15 yards. And then Jeff Brom steps off the sideline, doesn't do anything that's not done several times by any coach in any game. Mm-hmm. They throw another flag on him. So the next thing you know, you're changing a complete ball game because you're taking 30 yards off the kickoff, and you back Purdue up to the 10-yard line to make a kickoff. Syracuse runs it back to like the Purdue 40. You have set them up for the game-winning touchdown, and that's what happened. And I just thought, context, people, context.
Yeah. I completely agree. And I was gonna, before you went into that, I was gonna ask you if that's where you're going, because I'm in complete agreement with you. I mean, if it's like a Michigan Ohio State game and there's chippiness and you want to set the tone, but if it's a game that's been playing clean and it's just a contact, like in that game, for instance, we
want the players to decide the game. Now, if it's the game-winning touchdown pass and we know that there was a rusher who broke through the line and the center just grabbed him by the collar and it's a hold, call the hold, call the game. I would rather have not have a penalty decide the game, but still, if it's an egregious penalty and it was committed, call it. But when it comes to taunting and all those unsportsmanlike plays, like what we saw again, the sideline, if we're hurting football players by throwing them on the ground, then we better go to flag football. So I just hated to see that.
I would agree. That taunting, and to me, taunting is almost like one of the worst officiated calls in college football, because I see things all the time. I'm like, how is this not taunting? And that is, I'm not on the field. I don't hear the guys, but I mean, you can see people making gestures. I've seen people stand over a quarterback and almost just, celebrate over the guy. And then I've seen, guys make a little gesture in the end zone and get the taunting flag,
I would have told you probably 25 or 30 years ago, the 25-year-old me would have told you, I hate the taunting penalty. Get rid of it. These guys are tough enough to be able to take it. They're playing football. But I don't like taunting. It's different from celebrating. Celebrate, sack the quarterback, turn around, get away from him, celebrate with your teammates, throw your hands up, jump up and down, do whatever you want to do. Go into your little dance, as long as it's minimal. I am sick of seeing in the NFL every time somebody makes any kind of play, everybody's got to rush down the field into the end zone and take pictures and do, pose for photographs and all this other business. And it's like you made an interception off a deflected pass that was right to you. You didn't do anything that special. Great for you. You caught the football. You made it. It's just
some class,
getting ridiculous. Man. But I don't draw the line because at a certain point, these guys, they watch film, they lift weights, they run all year, they hit each other. To score a touchdown is a big deal. Most guys aren't Bryce Young where they throw 45 touchdown passes. Getting into the end zone is very difficult for the majority of these guys, and they do it once or twice a year, not 45 times a year. So it's a big deal. Let them celebrate. But the thing about the taunting is most of the time, the play that leads up to the taunting, whoever, quote, won that play, got the better of the other player. It's kind of an unfair situation. It's usually not, here's a running back coming through the hole. Here's a linebacker that's got him squared up. And who's the better man? Then, hey, you know what? I don't like taunting, but you've got some leeway to taunt there because you sized him up and it was man on man and you nailed him. Versus there's a receiver on the sideline, the ball's being thrown. You'll see sometimes the safety will just come out of nowhere and just lay him out and stand over him. Well, that receiver had no chance. He's focused on the ball. He's not in a physical contact situation. You are. Anybody can make that play, and you're standing over him like you did something special. You didn't do anything special. You're not the better man, the bigger man, the tougher guy. Yeah, he was waiting on the football.
The quarterback
not into a whole taunting thing because I could go on about some of these things, but of course that's why we're here.
All right, Mark. Well, that's just I wanted to get your take on it. I mean, so what do you think about? I mean, so you haven't noticed it being any worse or better this year?
I guess this is where my college football coverage suffers to a certain extent. I'm watching like 3 or 4 games on Saturday at the same time. So I'm never watching one game that intently. I'm trying to watch as many games as possible. So the officiating,
You got so much. I know. You break down games. I mean, you watch so many games, and I'll tell you, I'm impressed at all the play-by-plays that you remember when it comes to a game. And you'll tell me things I look at the scoreboards or watch the highlights. And I was talking to you just last week and earlier about the top 25, and you were telling me about things that happened in the game. I was like, man, I completely missed it. I'm going to have to backstep here a little bit because
I got to the point where I was trying to watch too many games at the same time, and I just don't have what I want to do. I was looking at this wall over here, and I was thinking, at some point I'd like to have about 4 to 6 fairly large monitors in front of me. Not that I could really focus on that many. I've got like 3 different size TVs and then 2 laptops, but I pretty much determined I can only really watch 2 games at the same time and then have a third game there if they're both in commercial or in a timeout or something. But I can really only, because I started trying to keep track of 3 and 4 games at the same time and watch them all. And then I realized, it's like 3:30 in the afternoon and the noon window's up. And I'm like, I can't really analyze any one of these 4 games because
I can't I'm good with one game, maybe flipping over to another game. I start to lose track of what's going on when I do anything more than that.
Yeah, and I hate that.
I got to hand it to you.
Situations come up and people call and be like, should they have done that? They only had 2 timeouts. And I'm thinking, I don't know that they had 2 timeouts because I wasn't watching the game that intently to know that they only had 2 timeouts to figure out. And I do love to post videos. And I have a lot of these in the past, but I haven't done one in a long time where I'm scrutinizing clock management and game management. I enjoy doing that, but so I need to watch games a little more intently to do that.
What I like to do is I like to watch, like for the Big Ten network puts out the games in 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And those are nice. I like to catch a game. If I can't watch it, I like to watch it on that. That's a great way to watch a game. It goes by. They do a good job of getting most of the good details in there.
All right, sir.
All right, have a good one, Mark.
Thanks, Ben. Have a good night. All right, next up here we got Jeffrey on the line, voice of college football. Jeffrey, what's going on?
I'm doing good. Sorry about I was walking or I was pacing the floor listening to you, and when you got done, I got on it real quick. But that game, man, against Nebraska, I was like, at the end when they fumbled it on that snap, I was like, uh-oh. I mean, I don't know if you saw it because you said you were getting on, doing your live streams.
I heard it. I didn't see it. I heard it.
But I was like, man, me and Dad were watching, and it was like, uh-oh, man. If they somehow fumbled that ball and then Rutgers hit a field goal, it'd have been pandemonium for the Nebraska fans, because all I know is watching Nebraska, some of their fans in the stands were like losing their minds already when they had to punt anyway to Rutgers. And then obviously they threw the pick, but it was like, man, I thought it was going to happen again. But what I was going to ask is do you think, obviously we don't know because he's not there anymore, but do you think if Scott Frost was the head coach still at Nebraska, do they beat Indiana and Rutgers? I mean, it's impossible to know, but what do you think on that?
Well, I was going to say as a joke, in reaction to your fumble comment, that Scott Frost with his arms folded on the sideline, having absolutely nothing to do with that snap and what happened. It would just be his luck and the Nebraska luck under him that they would have lost the fumble had he been standing on the sideline, even though he did absolutely nothing wrong. And I don't believe that, but anyway. On one hand, I would say that Nebraska must be a more disciplined football team and taking care of business in the fourth quarter. So they have won 2 fourth quarters here. So Scott Frost, notorious for losing 1-score games, had the worst record by far in the country in 1-score games. And most of those, well, there was a majority of those that were blown in the fourth quarter, of course. And I'm not talking about they were down by 3 scores. They came back to make it look close. No, they were in the game the whole game into the fourth quarter, and they blew the game. They got outplayed or whatever happened. And we know that they were one of the most penalized teams in the country. Just mistakes. They had like 5 false starts last year against Oklahoma and this year against Oklahoma, ironically. That they seem to be a more disciplined team. However, the penalty numbers would tell you otherwise, that they were just as penalized the last 2 weeks as they were, even more under Mickey Joseph. But I can't really answer that question. I would just be, nobody can answer that question. As you just said, we would be spitting at the wall on that one.
Yeah, he'd probably lose by 1 score, but we don't know. But I was also going to ask, so far this season, do you think that Indiana is the worst Big Ten East team, or is it Rutgers?
That's a great question. I think that since Indiana has some semblance of a passing game, Connor Baselake is a better quarterback than the 2 that play for Rutgers, and their receivers are better. I think Indiana has a higher ceiling. I think that when they're playing well, like they did in coming back against Illinois, sure, they got a lot of breaks in that game, but still they beat what's become like a mid-level Big Ten team in that game. I don't know that Rutgers is capable of that. Indiana can play a low-scoring, more defensive-sided game like Rutgers, or they can open it up and play a more high-scoring game and still be competitive. So I think they can win different ways, and I think they've got a higher ceiling. But Rutgers, with this defense that they've got, certainly they have a Big Ten caliber defense, and Indiana generally does not. It's a close call. I'll go with IU.
IU is being better than Rutgers by a little bit, yes.
By a little bit, yep.
So the thing about Indiana, I never mentioned this the other night, but DJ Matthews and Cam Camper were out against Nebraska, and I'm not saying that they would have won, but that did affect that game because, as you're saying, Indiana's passing attack is good, and against Illinois, Cam Camper and DJ Matthews had most of the yards in the passing game against Illinois, and against Nebraska, since they were out, their passing game was way worse. So I do think that if they both play, I think that Indiana would have maybe had a better chance of beating Nebraska. I think that did hurt them having them both out because Indiana can't run the ball because the offensive line is terrible.
They dropped 5 or 6 passes, correct, against Nebraska.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I got another question for you. Do you think that Texas A&M has a better chance to beat Alabama, or Indiana has a better chance to beat Michigan?
That's a great question. It shouldn't be a great question. Max Johnson's not playing, correct? Has that been confirmed?
I'm not 100% sure. I actually can't answer that. I'm sorry about that. I have no idea.
You don't need to be able to answer those. I just know that I saw some reports yesterday about Max Johnson, and I don't know if it was necessarily confirmed that he is not playing. Haynes King would provide a different dimension, with possibly more mistakes, and obviously he's not the passing downfield threat that Max Johnson is. The way they're playing right now, I think Indiana has a better shot to beat Michigan. For some reason, I can envision it, despite what we saw last year and despite all the talent Texas A&M has, it shouldn't even be, I shouldn't even have to contemplate it. It should be Texas A&M. But my gut tells me it's Indiana, although logic tells me that it's Texas A&M because their roster's almost as good as Alabama's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a great point. On Indiana, I think Indiana would have a better chance maybe to upset Michigan, but everybody's labeling this as a trap game for Michigan. And the fact that it's on Fox, it's going to be a bigger stage and everything with the big new kickoff crew being there. I think they're kind of hurting Indiana here because of the fact usually Indiana does better. Tom Allen succeeds when Indiana – people don't think they have a chance. And even Josh Pate over at, and I don't obviously not trying to promote anybody else, but people know Josh Pate on here. Josh Pate literally had a video on YouTube talking about, is this a trap game? It's like, come on, guys, don't do this. You're making Michigan respect Indiana. Give Michigan, literally give them the thought that there's no way they're going to lose, and that's when Indiana has a chance. To me, they're hurting Indiana by saying that there's a chance for Indiana to beat them.
Oh, I get you. You want this to be a noon kickoff on the Big Ten Network and nobody to talk about it, nobody to think about it, just kind of put it away and IU to jump out. And you know what? Normally, part of me wants to counterpoint you that it shouldn't matter. What's it matter if it's a trap game or not? If the players are focused on the game or not focused on the game one way or the other. However, players are on social media, players watch, players listen, and shoot, I'm not going to pretend that maybe some Michigan players get snapped out of a funk this week because the big noon kickoff's there and they know it's on national TV. When I say national TV, everything's on national TV, but it's a spotlight game on a network. And like you say, that people are talking about, hey, maybe this is the upset of the week. Maybe that wakes Michigan up a little bit. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Although, Jeffrey,
one
of my favorite stats, sorry to interrupt, one of my favorite stats doesn't exist, that I wish existed, and if I had the time, I would compile it myself, is I would define trap game, because we all know what a trap game is, but it would have to have some kind of definition of, you played a ranked team, and then you were going to play a ranked team and you're playing a team with a losing record or something like that. So you define the trap game. And then I actually want people to track this. I would love to have somebody go through and track it because we all think, it seems, that there is such a thing as a trap game but I would like to see if it actually plays out that way. If it can be statistically proven that trap games are more likely to be upsets.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, and yeah, I definitely agree 100%. I wish I could do that, but unfortunately, there's some statistics I can't measure, and that is a great point, though. I was gonna ask, kind of trending off the games for a sec. I was gonna ask. I did not watch your video, unfortunately. I had making my own videos, and I've watched some of your videos. But I did not get to see the one with the coaches being fired. I don't know who you had number one, but in your opinion, who you think's the most likeliest head coach to be fired next in college football?
Well, this is not any type of aberration off of what most people think, but I had Brian Harsin at 1.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who I had at 2. I'd have to go back through it. I don't remember. But yeah, Brian Harsin at 1.
Well, I agree with you there. I don't mean to interrupt you real quick, but I agree with you there because I made a video a long time ago, about probably a month ago, on hot seat coaches as well. And I had Carl Durrell number 1, Jeff Collins number 2, and Brian Harsin number 3. So my first 2 are gone. So Brian Harsin would be next in that order for that. So going back to you there. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there.
No, absolutely. So I am curious, and I'll have to do a little research myself on my own videos because I posted one in the off season as well, and would like to see how close I came on those because I posted one in the off season and had a list of 5 to 10, whatever it was. All right, sir. Anything else?
I got another question. It's kind of also, it's related to football, but I'm not getting into betting or whatever because my mom hates and all that. But I just thought it'd be interesting to ask you, since you kind of deal with spreads, guys, and everything. Do you think it's easier to bet the spread or the over under? Which one would you say is? I would say the spread, just off observation. But
yes, I'm not an over under guy. Although I would have to say I've never tried to select the over unders. I've never tried to select the over unders. So I told somebody the other day that is big on the over unders. Maybe I'm going to go through after I get off here tonight, go through all the games and select all my over unders. I just want to see how I do because I've never tried. But yeah, I'm more into the spread, which actually, this is a conversation for another time. I would argue that it's more valid in just selecting the winner of the game than it is against the spread. I think that's a more valid prediction and it makes more sense, but that's a explanation for another time.
Yeah, I agree with you there because a lot of time I'll get comments on my videos when I pick a team to win, and they'll say, hey, I don't think that either team's going to score as much. They're going to score less in the comment section. I'm like, man, I'm just picking who's going to win. The score doesn't really matter to me that much. I'm just randomly popping up a score. I'm like, hey, I'm picking this team. So I agree with you there. But, yeah, I agree with the over-under being harder than the spread because I'll never forget, we were talking to David, the headset guy. And he was talking about at week 1 of the Ohio State game in Notre Dame, and me and you both said the over when he was asking about it. And in that game, the over under was like 60, and the score was 21-10. So, because you're going off Ohio State scoring tons and tons of points, and they didn't because it was a week 1 game when your offense is not really clicking, and both teams didn't score much. So again, people would have got burned on that one.
I'm with you, Jeffrey. I posted something about a year ago. I wish YouTube was better. They go into this form. There it is. So this is actually in May of 21. And I predicted that I've got Scott Frost. I've got Dan Mullen fired. I've got, who else on here? Anyway, I'd be curious to see who I had in May of 21 getting fired. But I see Mullen on the list and oh, here we go. I got Clay Helton getting fired. Chip Kelly on the hot seat. Obviously, he's turned it around or may have. So there you go. Justin Fuente.
The only other thing I got.
He's gone.
Yeah, okay, yeah. He's gone, yeah. That's a great list because you got all those right. The only other thing I was going to ask you before, I know because there's tons of people in the chat or in the live stream thing coming on or whatever. But what game are you looking forward to the most this weekend?
I'm looking forward to. So the TCU Kansas game, I think, is good for college football. It's interesting. It intrigues me because I'm rooting for somebody to keep it going. So it's nice that one of them is going to be undefeated, and TCU is not necessarily that much of an underdog story. They just have been down for about 5 years, but they've been good in recent years. Prior to that, it's more about Kansas. I would love to see Kansas keep it going. So that intrigues me. If I could only watch one game. Maybe I'm missing a game here or there. I really want to see Tennessee and LSU play.
I agree with that 100%. I think one of the most underrated games is Purdue, Maryland. That's a really sneaky game. I like that game. I picked Maryland to win because of the home field, because of the fact that those two teams are very similar. But I can't wait for college football this weekend. Last thing, you did get my email earlier, didn't you?
I have not caught up with my emails today, so I'll be looking.
My email. I was saying thank you for you know what I'm saying. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
I mean, your show's fantastic. I love coming on here, man, and I wasn't expecting that, but again, thanks. And like I said, you guys have helped me out a lot on my channel, obviously, with all the subs I've gotten off of you guys. Thank you so much. And more people sub to Mark Rogers, man. This channel needs more subs. We need to get him more subs. Get to 100,000.
100K would be phenomenal. And while we're at it here, Jeffrey, your sports talk only, correct?
Only talk sports.
Only
yes, sir.
talk sports. Only talk sports. There you are. Let's see if I'm subscribed. I'm not. So, boom. You're at 94 now. There we go.
Thank you.
Sorry for not doing that sooner. We got that done.
Thank you so much. I subscribed to you a long time ago. Right when I got my YouTube account, I did it, man. And I was like, man, more people, like I said, need to sub to you because, again, this channel is awesome. But I'll definitely try to call in tomorrow on the recaps of all the games if I can do it before I got to go to bed for church. But it was good to call. I was going to call in yesterday, but I got on too late because I was watching the NFL game. But because you were going off, I think I was right in the chat, and you're like, you're done for the night. I'm like, I'll just go on tomorrow and talk about Nebraska.
Yeah, we had some interesting calls last night for sure. Had to go off on a few people last night, but that's always fun. Jeffrey, what you need to do on these Saturday night shows is you let me know when you need to hit the sack, and when I see in here, we'll do the Disney pass or whatever they call that at the amusement parks. We'll cut you in line.
Oh, thank you. It'd be a little bit better if I was on the West Coast. If I was on the West Coast, it'd be no problem.
Absolutely.
But I'm on the East Coast, man. I want to watch these Pac-12 games, but it's just too late.
Yeah, so I like to watch the Pac-12 games too, but I started figuring that it's ridiculous if I'm going to watch Pac-12 football and then get on here at 2:00 in the morning just to start 2:00 in the morning. So I get on about 11:30. I'm on here during the Pac-12 games. As you see, we're on here till 3:00 in the morning. Then I'm working my top 25, and yeah, it's a late night on Saturday for sure.
Yeah, you do hard work. You work all day, 10 a.m. in the morning. You're doing interviews, and you're going all the way into the night. I don't see how you do it. I made 4 videos today, and I'm just completely worn out. I was like, man, the uploading and the thumbnails and all that. I'm like, man, it's just so much work, man. But I can't believe how much work you do. It's amazing, and you do a fantastic job. And I try to catch as much stuff as I can, but you do a fantastic job.
Appreciate that, Jeffrey.
Thanks for subbing my channel. You didn't have to, but thanks.
Yeah, let's see here. So we'll look this up. We'll get the link here in just a second. We'll drop it in the chat so everybody only talk sports, but I'll drop the link in the chat, and everybody, we've got about 175 online, and hopefully we can get some folks on over to your channel.
Thank you so much. That's awesome, man. Thank you. and I can't wait to come on tomorrow, man. Thank you.
All right, Jeffrey. Good to see you, man. All right, so we have just posted the link. You know, you've got no callers behind you, so that's up to you there, Jeffrey. I'm just going to be man, we got so many comments to get through. My goodness, I'm like a zillion comments behind. But regardless, I just posted the link to the show for people to join. Now we're going to post the link to Jeffrey's channel so everyone can subscribe there. All right.
And thank you. There's no one behind me.
Yeah, keep going.
Wow, I can't believe it. I had everything plugged up to try to make the connection better on the internet. So I had my phone, or I actually had my dad's old phone. I don't have a phone yet, but my dad's old phone, I had it plugged up, so I don't have any of the games. So I'm trying to think what else is on we could talk about. I had everything I had written down, and I thought it was too many questions because, you know, I try to keep it around 5 questions so people can get on, because unfortunately sometimes I can just go forever when I'm talking sports because I love it so much. But
well, I'll tell you this, Jeffrey. I don't know if you were with us when we used to have a call-in system, a regular call-in over the phone system.
I did it one time.
What I've noticed here is that since we moved on from the call-in system, because actually, you know, we can see people's faces. Number one, everybody tells us the audio is clear. Plus, that was costing us like $12 to $15 a show, so there was no reason not just to do it this way. But I did get a ton more calls than when people could just see this is the number and they'd call in, as opposed to trying to find a link. So we do get a lot less phone calls, unfortunately. And we would like to see a lot more people join the show, because we've got a pretty regular rotation, folks, of everyone that typically calls the show most of the time. So we would like to see some new names and some new faces, folks, and don't want to put anybody on the spot. So you don't need to be on camera if you call the show. You can shut your camera off. We'll keep you off the screen. You can just call in like a call-in show. It's
kind of ironic because when you had your calling system, the phone line, I called the one time and you had me on for like 5 minutes, and then the next guy came on. But the thing is that I didn't have a YouTube account at the time, which is why I could, or an email address. So I couldn't do the StreamYard. So that's why you didn't hear from me for like 3.5 months, because I said I was going to call in soon. And I was actually bummed about it, because I was like, man, I want to call in again. Mark's awesome. And it's like I couldn't do it. So I think maybe that could be another thing, because I don't know if a lot of people know about, you know, all this junk that you have to do it, because it's not that hard. I mean, I was actually, like I said, I'm no technology Jeffrey. I don't know anything about technology. It's like, hey, if I could figure it out, anybody could figure it out. And I did the camera the first time because I didn't even have my YouTube channel yet when I did the first time on the camera with you, because I wanted to practice, you know, talking so I could be like in front of a camera. And actually, it's a lot easier for me to do it when I'm talking to you than it is when I'm doing my videos, because I'm talking to someone else instead of just me staring at a blank screen. It's a lot harder to me.
Yeah, it is difficult. You know, different people are used to different things. And certainly I was on television for quite a long time, so it's not a big deal to me, but I understand that everybody has their own comfort place.
I think I'm getting a little bit better at it because of the fact when I first started, my speaking was kind of off because I was nervous and everything, but I think I'm getting a little bit better. But I don't know how to do any editing or anything. That's why, like, I have to be like 100%. You know, I'm not saying perfect, but like I make mistakes. Like one of my videos the other day on Florida, Missouri, I said that Tennessee had beaten Florida 16 of the last 17 times. And I had to get rid of the whole video because Florida's beaten Tennessee 16 of the last 17 times. And it's like, man, dude, if Tennessee fans only wish they beat Florida that many times in a row like that. But yeah, I do that sometimes. I like to say the opposite thing. And on my video today on Illinois, I said Brett Bielema was playing real well. I'm like, yeah, he can't play at all, man. That guy. But that's what I do. I make mistakes like that. I got to redo the whole video.
Well, you know, nowadays with the way people cut up YouTube videos, and I don't do this because I'm kind of old school. So for me, it's I start record, it's a one take, I start all the way through, and that's it. And if I make a mistake, I start over and I do it like that. But you see a lot of these videos where they say like one thing and then cut, one thing, cut. So that's all you have to do. It's just people are used to these, we call them jump cuts in the business, and they're completely outlawed in traditional TV. But now this is a whole new world. People don't mind jump cuts. Basically, you could cut all that up. You wouldn't have to redo the entire video. You just, restate that and toss it right in there.
Yeah, I'm trying to learn because I've been trying to figure out how to do the editing, and I will figure it out. Me and my dad were trying to learn how to do it and all that. So I'm sure I can do it eventually, but I'm just trying to figure it out. But you are right. I think, to me, though, like with the editing, though, it's like someone, one of my family members or whatever told me, it's kind of like it's more authentic when you do it without editing, because when you're doing all the editing, like you're saying all these lines and you're flamboyant and everything, but it's not authentic because you're going the whole time and there's no cuts and people can see that and you're going. And to me, that's a lot more, that's talent versus if you're cutting it up and you're putting stuff in, then it's not as authentic as you going the whole entire time like you do. Because I noticed you don't cut, and there's a few other channels where a lot of guys don't cut. And I like the ones that cut because it's very high quality and the production's good. And I mean, they're putting all this crazy stuff, these graphics in their videos. Because I had a comment today. Someone said, if you could put graphics in your videos, it'd be great. And I'm like, dude, I just started this YouTube thing. I don't know how to do anything. I'm just in front of my webcam and I'm just rolling. I try to speak clearly so you hear my score prediction. I don't know how to put it on screen. But it's like, again, the authenticity to me is better when you don't edit.
And if you notice my graphics, they're a bit embarrassing. Like I put together graphics, like I'll put together various statistics and whatever in a graphic, but they're whatever. I use a MacBook, so whatever the iMovie formula is, we need a whole revamp of the Voice of College Football here, graphics packages and all sorts of different things to upgrade, because we're not there yet by any stretch of the imagination. Jeffrey, by the way,
you aren't.
Keep going.
You aren't talking to the normal 18-year-old here. I'm just letting you know that, because again, I think your graphics are fantastic. Most people would say they're bad. I think they're fantastic because again, I can't even do it at all. And I mean, I'm not saying I'm old school, but I mean, I'm like more of I like stuff, just the traditional. Like I still got a Wii, like, you know what I'm saying? Like I got my Wii I've had since I was 7, and I don't have none of the new games. I listen to older type music. Like the new stuff don't bother me. I'm more old school, even though I'm 18. I'm a weird guy, I guess.
No, that's cool. That's cool. You're an old soul. That's a compliment. Well, I will tell you that what I've got envisioned for this channel and for the look and for a ton of things is completely different than what we are delivering. We could upgrade this significantly. We could have the best college football channel. I have no question about that. But I
already think it's the best.
People. So we're not.
I already think it's the best channel.
Well, I will say that I appreciate that so much, but. And then I want to get to a comment in the chat because this is kind of fun. That from working in ESPN for so many years, people don't realize that when they launch a show, let's say at the network level, those people are working on that show all day. Like College Football Live, let's say, it's a half-hour show. Those people are working 8 hours, a full crew, 25 people working on nothing but that show. I shouldn't say, some of them are working on multiple shows, but regardless, full crew working on that show, preparing for like 8 hours to put that show on. And before they launch the show, before they do the show one time, they will block out an entire month and they'll rehearse that show every day for a month before they ever go live with it. Now, I would never, it's not realistic to have that kind of time, but it would be nice to actually produce a show. Like I just come on here, obviously just flip on the on button and record and start talking. I don't prepare anything. I just have too much going on with running 25 channels, but I would love to actually produce a really good college football show at some point. Would be fun.
Well, a lot of people don't understand because a lot of people will say, I've heard so many people in my family, friends, whatever, and just a lot of people that they'll say that YouTubers don't work hard. They're just in their parents' basement. They don't work hard. That's bull. I mean, like I said, I made 4 videos today, and I worked probably 5-6 hours doing it all. I'm doing the videos, writing the stats down, doing all this kind of stuff, and I'm not even putting graphics and editing. It takes forever. So people out there saying YouTubers don't work hard, unless they have like some of the Rhett and Link, good mythical morning people that have millions of stuff, they got like 30 employees. They had to start somewhere too. You work hard. It's a lie. You work hard.
Absolutely. And like last night, I hated to get off here. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'd been on for close to 3 hours, and people were complaining, which is a nice thing. It's very nice that people complain that I'm leaving and I'm getting off the air, but at the same time, they don't realize, we were starting at 9 o'clock in the morning, working all day and all night, and so forth and so on. So these are the kind of people, and I'm sure at some point, Jeffrey, with you gaining more and more popularity and posting more and more videos, you're going to start to get haters, of course. So that's kind of the fun part. So we got this guy, Mr. Michael. So I don't know if you're familiar. We've got a Miami channel, and we've got a couple Miami shows on there on Wednesday and Thursday. So that's H1H. That's our Thursday guy. Cam Underwood's our Wednesday Miami guy. They do a phenomenal job. We've been doing a Miami show for a long time. So, Michael says here that he wishes that they would ditch this fraud, whatever that means. So these are the type people, Jeffrey, that I would love. I'm just pleading and begging for these people to call, actually not be a clown, not be a coward, and call and tell me what you're talking about.
People do that all the time. Message boards are funny because you'll read some of the craziest stuff on message boards. And it's like if they were in front of the guy that they were writing to, they wouldn't even say what they're writing. It's because they know they're never going to meet the guy or the people that they're writing to. It's like, you're right, they're cowards. I love in your top 25 when you're like, come on, everybody, come on and come on the show. It's like, just do it. It's like, if you don't agree, explain your reasoning why you don't agree, and maybe you'll explain to them why you have your opinion and they have theirs, but they don't, because it's mostly because their opinion's wrong and they know it, and they don't want people to admit to them that they are wrong, or they don't want to admit that they're wrong. Usually that's the case. I've experienced so far in my 18 years of life. That's usually the case.
I hear you, and you have nailed that in your 18 years of life. Blitzberg enjoys your channel right there. You're knowledgeable. Nice. There we go.
Thanks.
All right, Jeffrey.
Thanks a lot, Blitzberg.
We did gain a couple guys on the line here that are waiting to come on since we've been talking. So I appreciate you being here. Enjoy the games tomorrow.
Thanks again. Thanks for subbing to my channel. Everybody sub to Martin. Thanks. And I can't wait to call in tomorrow if I'm still awake. Thank you.
See you, Jeffrey. It
was a good chat. Thank you.
It's our guy, Jeffrey. Let's move it on to Mike. Mike Fort's on the line, Michigan fan. What's going on, Mike?
Hey, Mark. How's it going?
I am doing just fine. Appreciate your patience. How's it going tonight?
I'm just, like I said, just running through a series of emotions because I just got back from my workout. I did that after I could not understand that game to save my life. It was a tale of two halves.
Yes.
I mean, Vedral came out of that first half just looking like a champ. I mean, he was hitting his receivers. Nebraska's defense is, suspect to say the best, but I mean, I was, told that, Rutgers has no offense to speak of, but I mean, even though it was 13-0, they were just looking like they were moving the ball. And all of a sudden halftime hit and the script got completely flipped. I think he threw 3 interceptions in the second half.
Yes.
And some of those were just straight ugly passes.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird that he was, hitting his receivers practically in stride for most of the first half. In the second half, he was just throwing there were no black jerseys in a lot of places he was passing.
Yeah, Rutgers is just in a place where Greg Schiano knows how they have to play a game to have a chance, and they definitely did it for the most part tonight, outside of those 3 picks. And then, of course, they would rather protect a lead than have to come back and win, and they were put in that situation after throwing an interception, which led to only a 27-yard drive needed, 1 play, for them to lose the lead, and then they had to score, get the ball back, and score. And of course, that's not the situation Rutgers wants to be in.
No,
and they couldn't even drive it long enough to get a field goal.
And it just seems like there was bad play calling on both sides. But I don't know if Schiano does he call the plays for Rutgers, or they have an OC for that? But whoever their play caller is, they need to be fired, because it almost looked like, I was saying in chat, it looked like Matt Weiss and Harbaugh calling plays for us. Rutgers looked like they were playing not to lose instead of to win the game, and it looked like it ended up costing them.
Yeah, well, that's how they play every game. That's their style.
And I don't know tons about Rutgers, so this was kind of a refresher course on how Rutgers plays. So, but I thought Schiano was a little bit more of a gambler than that.
Well, I think he was a gambler with the Rutgers program that he built in the Big East that was more competitive against its peers and had talent that was close to West Virginia, Pitt, etc., as opposed to what he's got now. And especially when he's got a game like this, where he figures, I've got a chance to win this game. Like, this is one of their games, one of the 3 to 4 games that they play out of 9 that he has a reasonable chance of winning. And that's what he determines the formula to be, especially since Nebraska has a long history now of making the mistake that's going to hand the game to the other team. So I understand his approach.
Yeah, I guess he just kind of thought that he kind of, rest on his laurels, because I see Nebraska made some mistakes. Now, I thought that when they went for it on, was it 4th and 2, 4th and 3, when they were in field goal range, they could have cut it to a field goal lead. Actually, I think it would have been, I think that would have made it it would have been within a field goal. Instead, they went for it and they got nothing. It looks like, I don't know, is Anthony Grant not 100%? Because it seemed like their backup running back was in a lot that game.
Yeah, I don't know if anything happened to him during the game, but he still carried the ball the most. He had 18 or 19 carries. But I don't know if anything happened during the course of the game, or just because he wasn't too successful that they thought that Jacques Yant could have been the guy tonight.
Now is their backup the Yant Jan? I can't remember.
Yes, he's the backup.
Is he more of like a utility guy? Kind of like.
No, he's a hitch it between the tackles muscle guy.
Strictly north and south runner?
Yeah, I don't want to say that he's strictly north and south, but he's not a utility guy. He's not going to be a guy that you're going to get involved in the passing game or do exotic things with. No.
That game, like I said, it just confused me, because I didn't know whose identity was what, because I thought Rutgers was going to, looking at the first half, I thought Rutgers was going to run away with this, and then it just completely imploded.
They still ran Grant 19 times and Yant only 4. So they stayed with Grant.
Because it seems like every time I was looking up, that Yant guy was on the field. And maybe it was just because it seemed like he was kind of doing, it seemed like he was trying to do too much. I don't know what Grant was doing. I guess he just wasn't that effective against the Rutgers front 7. How many yards?
How ineffective.
How many yards did Grant have?
He only had 47 yards on 19 carries.
Yeah, I guess that kind of explains why you can't. That's about what, 2.7 yards per carry.
Yeah, 2.5.
2.5. I can see that now.
Nebraska is getting torched in the secondary by every team on the planet, and Rutgers went 12 of 30 passing tonight with 3 interceptions.
And how much of that was just, Vedral just completely bottoming out in the second half, though? His stats at the first half couldn't have been that bad.
No, because he led a touchdown drive right out of the gate. So, that just shows you that Rutgers is so anemic throwing the ball that even against a horrible pass defense, they're completing 35% of their passes.
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering, is this like, because I know a lot of times whenever, a coach gets fired, they'll kind of rally around the interim. And I was just kind of wondering if this is like, the team just kind of, trying to get Mickey Joseph the job or something.
Well, that was the thought going into Oklahoma, that they might be able to pull the upset. Now it's kind of strange to think that Oklahoma's looked as bad as they have the last 2 weeks. Nebraska fires Frost. Mickey Joseph takes the job. A lot of people were thinking, hey, they're going to have this big inspirational effort, their first game, and they get completely run out of the stadium by Oklahoma. And now Oklahoma looks awful. And Nebraska, let's understand that they've beaten maybe the 2 worst teams in the Big Ten, along with Northwestern. The bottom of the Big Ten's not looking too sharp right now. There's a collection of teams that are pretty bad. And Nebraska, Scott Frost might have won these games as well. They killed Northwestern last year. They beat Rutgers the last time they played them 2 years ago in Piscataway. So these aren't necessarily, I wouldn't chalk these up to Mickey Joseph. He held serve. He beat 2 teams that they should beat. Now, if he can pick off a Minnesota, a Purdue, and Illinois, then that's going to show me something.
Yeah, I was thinking that too, because it looks like Nebraska's, like I said, they've got Indiana up, they've got Northwestern up, they've got Rutgers up. So now they're kind of going to get in the meet their schedule, and we're going to kind of see if they can, really do something for Mickey, because it's not going to get easier from here on out.
Well, no, it's not. They've got a tough stretch drive. Yep.
Yeah, like I said, it was an interesting night. I was over there watching it live, with some of the Nebraska fans, and I don't think they really expected too much out of this game either. But that fan base doesn't seem to give up.
Well, it's an interesting fan base, and I say that in a kind way because they are loyal and they are optimistic, despite as much as they've been beaten down. I think when you've got the heritage that they do, which includes dominance in the 90s and national championships, then they still remember that. They still think of themselves that way, and they're. I don't know that there's a team in the country. We would have to see it tried out at places like Ohio State and Michigan and Alabama and others, that if you trotted out horrible teams for 5 years, whether they would still pack the stadium.
I think we lost our sellout streak whenever Rich Rod and Brady Hoke came in there.
Yeah.
So I know there was some dismal times for a lot of Michigan. We had a lot of bandwagon guys jump off. And they don't seem to do that with Nebraska. They're pretty loyal for that.
They certainly are. They certainly are.
Well, I just thought.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, I just thought I'd vent and go ahead and give you your next time.
Appreciate you calling.
Thanks a lot.
Call anytime. Enjoy the game tomorrow.
Oh, I intend to.
Michigan, Indiana, big noon kickoff. And that's the ball game at noon on Fox. Somebody had complained yesterday about Fox's decision to highlight Michigan and Indiana since there are such better games on the docket, but these decisions are made because of money. And the split between the Big Ten and the SEC of the top 10 games of every week in college football, the top 10 games of the year, the top 20 games of the year is pretty dominant. It is extremely dominant between those two conferences. So there has to be a Texas-Oklahoma kind of game for Fox to opt in that decision. And obviously they don't have the game this year. I don't believe that was a Fox game last year. Yes, it must have been a Fox game last year because this year we've got Oklahoma, Texas. Where are they playing? Who's got that game? This noon window, this is always difficult for me. For some reason, the pendulum of important games and interesting games has swung to the noon window. Not just with a Fox decision a couple years ago to spotlight its noon game, but across the board. Okay, Texas, Oklahoma. Yeah, ABC. It must have been a Fox game last year. It rotates back and forth. So at noon, Tennessee, LSU, ESPN. TCU, Kansas, FS1. So, bingo. There you got it right there. Fox FS1. How many people in America can get Fox, the main network? Well, basically, if you've got a television set, even if you operate in the 1950s, if you've got rabbit ears on the top of your roof, then you get Fox. If you don't get Fox, then you don't get pretty much anything. So the Fox network is telling us we would rather broadcast a 21-point spread game between Michigan, who is a national championship possible contender, and Indiana, who's also ran in the Big Ten. We would rather show you that game than we're going to bury FS1 on your cable system where not many people can find it. And that is the TCU Kansas game where we've got a combination of 9-0 teams playing. Now, for me, it doesn't matter. I don't care where the games are. I can get them all. So it doesn't make any difference. And for many of you, it's the same thing. You've got a cable system, cable package with a zillion sports channels. You can watch whatever you want. So it doesn't matter if it's on FS1, if it's on Fox. I could care less. I can watch TCU and Kansas, and I will watch TCU and Kansas above Michigan and Indiana. But Fox is telling the nation this game's more important because Michigan brings eyeballs. The Big Ten brings eyeballs. So we are putting it on the main network. That's what Fox is telling the nation. But it's not as important of a game. It's not as interesting of a game until we see it play. Actually, it could turn out to be a more interesting game. But on face value, it's not as interesting as TCU and Kansas. This SEC network game is a good game to me. Arkansas and Mississippi State. I like that matchup. Texas, Oklahoma. And again, on the Big Ten network, Purdue and Maryland. Wow. Okay, we got Aiden on the line. Aiden, what's going on tonight?
What's up, buddy? How you been?
I'm doing well. What's going on with you?
Just got back from the Nebraska Rutgers game. And I'm drinking and doing else.
Oh, that's right. You told us you were going to the game. So tell us about the ball game. What was the raucous environment looking like there at Piscataway? I'm glad that you made it out of that crazy madhouse.
That is a scam. That is a scam. That is a lie. That raucous environment is a lie, sir.
Oh, I just assumed it was Rutgers, Nebraska, Piscataway. I just envisioned just a madhouse. Tailgating, probably 50,000 people in the parking lot.
Yeah, yeah, Nebraska won, which is good news for my mother. Because she's a Nebraska fan for whatever odd reason.
It's good to keep mom happy. That's good. We need to display our Nebraska helmet here. There we go. Winners tonight, 2-1 in the Big Ten. Big Ten Western Division leaders.
Wow.
Sitting high atop the Big Ten.
Man, but Northwestern might be one of the worst teams in Power 5 football, if not the worst.
I'm with you.
How they beat Nebraska is beyond me. Also, I think Clemson being ranked below Michigan 4 or 5 weeks in is asinine.
So you believe that Clemson should be ranked ahead of Michigan?
Yes.
Well, I definitely agree with you. There's no comparison between the two schedules at this point.
Because I mean, Clemson beat 2 top 15 teams. I mean, the one team Michigan played that has a pulse, and that is not a dead Power 5 program, Group of 5 program, is Maryland, and it was an 8-point game. And I'm not saying that Maryland's a bad team. I think Maryland's really good.
Okay. What's my response supposed to be? Well,
I'm not saying you're supposed to have a response. So.
Okay. We can agree that Maryland and Purdue should be a really good game.
Oh, really, really high-flying game, too.
Probably, but let's understand that Purdue's coming off a game in which they won 20-10, and they ran it more than they threw it. So I agree with you. Most likely, we're looking at maybe Aiden O'Connell's shaking some rust that he had last week because he missed the previous game, and also he had rib injuries that I think compromised him last week. Hopefully he's getting better, more healthy, and will be able to attack a Maryland defense that's not nearly as good as Minnesota's defense. So I agree. We could see a typical, what we would expect to be Purdue, Maryland. It should be an entertaining game. It's going to be a game that I'm going to be watching. Yep.
Yeah,
and it's more important to Purdue than to Maryland. It's a more important game as it stands because I think it's reasonable to expect Maryland to lose to the Big Ten powers, so they are not contending for a division championship. They've already lost to Michigan, whereas Purdue, I expect to be in the race for the Big Ten West.
Yeah, they should be. The Big Ten West is ass. And I will say this about Purdue's run game. I think overall they have a complementary running game to the offense they run.
Yeah, they do now.
Oh man, but I also wish some of those haters on your top 25 videos would just call in for a change.
Yes, I want them to call in. I'm not going to be mean. I'm not a mean guy. I'm a nice guy. I would hear what they have to say.
Wouldn't that be nice?
What would that be like?
I said, wouldn't that be nice?
Yes, it would be nice. I have baited them as much as I possibly can. I've invited them nicely. I've tried the nice approach to invite them nicely. I've tried the poke them in the side approach, try to challenge their manhood, called them clowns and cowards to get them on here to just explain their points, because I just get a bit annoyed, and I think rightfully so, when people leave comments that this is moronic and you're an idiot and whatever, but they don't explain themselves to explain why. And I would just love for them to join the show. It would be fun. I'll give them their say.
Because I mean, I don't think it is that hard to click a StreamYard link, let it just walk you right through it, wait however long you have to wait, and then explain your positioning.
And I tell you that if we had the capability of leaving them a link in the comments section that would stay the right link, but obviously each show has a different link, so I can't. Maybe I'll do that next time. That's actually, that's a good idea. Next week, I'm going to generate the show early, a few days early, grab the link. I'm going to leave it in the, yes, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave the link in the comments section days prior. And so there'll be less of an excuse.
Because I mean, this is so easy. I think Jeff Collins and Brian Harsin can do it. And Brian Harsin is a dead man walking.
Yeah, it would be a miracle for him to turn that thing around against that schedule. He had his chance last weekend against LSU. That would have been a big win for him. And they left it on the field, and he called a stupid
Alabama
option play.
Also, because TJ Finley couldn't do anything, let's be honest.
I don't believe TJ Finley was the quarterback for that game. He's hurt. Their quarterback is Robbie Ashford.
I thought you were referring to last year when you said big win, and that's why I said TJ Finley.
No, I was talking about no. I'm talking about Brian Harsin right now. So they played LSU last weekend. They were winning 17-0. They were down 4 points late in the game. They had a drive inside the 10. They could have scored to win the game. They blew it. No, I'm talking about Brian Harsin possibly had a great golden opportunity to pull off a big win last week.
Oh, and then that halfback pass that got intercepted by Harold Perkins.
Yes, absolutely. You're on it.
Yeah, that was my bad. I thought you were talking about the Alabama game from last year.
No, that's quite all right. And Harold Perkins, by the way, is one of the guys that I'm talking about when somebody earlier had me size up Tennessee and LSU. He's a heck of a player, and LSU is loaded with tremendous speed and athleticism on defense.
I think Harold Perkins might be the X factor for that Tennessee LSU game, because just with the way Tennessee operates and how they run, I think you need guys like Harold Perkins to defend that offense.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. It's going to be a fascinating game, and I really want to see this one.
I mean, if LSU's defensive line does not come to play, it's going to be a long night for them.
All right, man. You got anything else for us?
I mean, not much, brother. Have a good night.
Well, I appreciate you being here. Enjoy the football tomorrow.
I will, brother. You do the same.
All right. Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. Let's look at Nebraska's upcoming schedule. Again, we wanted to be able to serve the Nebraska fan base who has a post-game show each and every week. So understand, folks who just joined us here on the main channel, that we've got all these team channels, and we deliver post-game here at the Voice of College Football every week on the Ohio State channel, Michigan, Penn State, Nebraska, Iowa, Oklahoma, Texas, West Virginia, USC, Oregon, Miami, LSU, Alabama, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech, and we were hoping to add Florida State tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. We are hoping that we are adding Florida State post game here at the Voice of College Football with FSU taking on North Carolina State. Another game I would love to see. This, man, I think is the best schedule of games. And then we'll get to the Nebraska upcoming schedule with the Huskers at 2-1, leading the Big Ten Western Division. All right. 2 games currently going on, Colorado State at Nevada and UNLV at San Jose State. Okay. In the books tonight, Nebraska 14, Rutgers 13. Houston defeated Memphis. Ooh, that looked like a barn burner. I saw that Memphis was up like 26-13 in this game, 2-score lead, and they blew it. Houston won 33-32. Going to have to check out the highlights. I typically record all these games, but I figured I'm going to be on late tonight. I'm not going to go back and watch Houston and Memphis play. However, tomorrow, what do we do at noon? What do we do? This drives me nuts. How am I supposed to watch all this football? Because I want to see Arkansas and Mississippi State. I want to see Purdue and Maryland. I want to see Texas and Oklahoma. I know the Sooners are down and they could get blown out. I want to see Tennessee and LSU. I want to see TCU and Kansas. That's 5 games I want to see. And that doesn't even include the possibility, unlikely, but possibility that Indiana challenges Michigan. And then suddenly I'd want to see that game. I am not watching the beginning of Michigan, Indiana. I will, if that game goes as scripted and Michigan wins that game 42-10, then I will not watch one play of that game because I got too much good football to watch. But if it gets to halftime and Michigan's up 13-10 at halftime, then I'm like, okay, well, I got to watch the second half to see what goes on with Michigan. And I got to admit that we're running a service to all of you here at the Voice of College Football in the past 2 weekends. What did I do on Saturday? I was watching Michigan, Maryland, and I was watching Michigan, Iowa, and I produced a video, and a lot of people watched it. So for business purposes, do I just watch Michigan play and produce a video? Because I guarantee this makes no sense, except this tells me that we've got a lot of Michigan people here, is that TCU, Kansas, so much more interesting and intriguing than Michigan, Indiana. But I guarantee if I watch TCU in Kansas and produce a video, that will get 2% of the viewership that if I produce a Michigan analysis video. So, and I'm even the nerd that wants to watch Louisville and Virginia play, for as awful as both of them are. But of course, I'm not going to watch one play of that game because there's too many good football games. There are 5 good football games at noon. And I think the real MVP wants to talk about it and probably wants to talk about the SEC.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing well. What's going on tonight?
How are you doing this evening, Mark?
I'm doing well. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. All right.
I don't know what the issue I had was for a moment. Sorry, I'm trying to.
While you make your opening comments, I'm going to rearrange the top shelf and line it with all SEC teams.
Well, that's very impressive. You know, the SEC's got the games of the week as we usually do. Tennessee goes on the road to face LSU. If Tennessee somehow pulls off that win, I would argue is the game of the year next week between the Alabama Crimson Tide versus the Tennessee Volunteers. That would be a fantastic, potentially top 5 matchup. Texas A&M this week plays Alabama. You got the Fisher versus Saban aspect. I think everybody on planet Earth is rooting for Texas A&M to lose by at least 50 points.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I've seen nobody want Texas A&M to win. I don't know anybody that likes Jimbo Fisher.
So it doesn't surprise me what you're telling me because people tend to, I think there's something inherent in most of us that doesn't like the spoiled rich kid that has everything. So it's okay if that individual that has every advantage in the world then actually works hard and makes something of themselves. But for the rich kid, and this is Texas A&M, this is my analogy, the rich kid who has everything handed to them, but then they blow it and they screw it up and they don't work hard and they don't do anything with it, then those are the people that we don't like. And that's Texas A&M right now. Yes, I get it.
Oh, yeah, you're exactly right. Georgia plays Auburn. Two interesting angles in that game. One, does Brian Harsin get fired after the game if they lose by 40? 2, if Georgia wins by 40, we can say they right the ship. But if they only win by 10, we could say Georgia, this is the 3rd week in a row that they've struggled against an inferior opponent, most people would say. So I think most people would have them probably as the 3rd best team in the country. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I am wondering about the network's decisions this weekend when LSU and Tennessee is relegated to a noon time slot. And again, that's not a horrible time slot, but that's going to be a fractured audience because there's just so many great games on at noon versus CBS. Of course, they had this pinned the entire offseason that Alabama, Texas A&M was going to be one of their few night games, even though most likely CBS is showcasing Alabama and Texas A&M at night. So it's supposed to be a great game. Like it's supposed to be, these are the kind of games you spotlight because CBS isn't ABC that shows one every week. This is only like twice a year, 3 times a year, maybe. And this game, most likely it's going to be 11:15 tomorrow night. And it's going to be Alabama 48, Texas A&M 17. and it's going to be like, yeah, this was a horrible game, and who cares? And nobody's watching at this point. But that's what they decided to do. And Auburn and Georgia in their what is typically their prime 3:30 spot on CBS as a 29-point spread. I don't understand the decisions.
Well, Mark, it's not about the quality of the games. It's about the quality of the brands that are playing.
Yeah.
And it goes back to your TCU versus Kansas and Ohio State versus Michigan State previews. I guarantee you that the Ohio State Michigan State preview is going to have more views than your TCU versus Kansas preview.
Oh, absolutely, it did.
And I think for next week, my only advice for you is you need to do a Michigan Penn State preview and an Alabama versus Tennessee preview. That has to be done. Like those videos would pop off, in my belief.
I got to get them done early in the week. I know too. I can't be releasing those on like Thursday afternoon. I got to get those out early. And yeah, that's got to be a priority every week now that I do at least like 3 of the biggest games and preview those early and get those out. But and to further your point, I think I have this straight. Kirk Herbstreit and Chris Fowler, the #1 broadcast team at ABC/ESPN, they're going to the Ohio State-Michigan State game.
Yeah, I don't expect that to be a game, but it's on ABC at 4 p.m. Eastern, I believe.
Yeah.
And it's about 2 big brands, and that's what it's about. And that's what matters in college football is the brand size, not really how good the team is. I mean, the team, how good they are matters, but if you've got a big enough brand, you can take a hit for a few years.
LSU and Tennessee aren't big brands. Like if CBS showed LSU and Tennessee tomorrow night, I would think that they would get a great audience for that game, and it's actually an important game.
Oh, I think they would get in a great audience, but I don't think they would get as great as an audience as Auburn, Georgia, or Tennessee, or Alabama, Texas A&M. I think the brand of Auburn and Georgia is just bigger at this current moment than Tennessee versus LSU. Now, give it a few years. Hopefully, Tennessee gets back to being really good, and then it could change. But for right now, it's not the case. And you mentioned the Louisville versus Virginia game. Here is something to keep an eye on. There's been reports, I'm not sure if you saw, that if Louisville loses to Virginia, Scott Satterfield will get fired after the game. Now, I don't know how true the reports are, but there are reports out there of that being the case.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that. That's might be my post-game video then, right there.
Yeah. And speaking of coaches getting fired, Mark, you know, we've had this trend 5 weeks. It feels like in a row, maybe or 5 coaches at least being fired. Who's next? Who gets fired tomorrow?
Well, you're swinging me towards Satterfield, and they're playing a bad enough team that if they do lose that game, you know, they just lost to – so Boston College has looked like the worst team in the ACC. And then Louisville lost to them last weekend. And now they're playing the team that looks like the second worst team in the ACC. And if they lose to them on the road, then I think he takes – under that scenario, he takes over first place even or tied with Harsin because Harsin's in a no-win situation. Other than they play well, they're not winning that game. They're not going to win. So if they lose 31-17 and they play relatively well, maybe he hangs on to his job. But, you know, that could be a 42-10 game, and maybe he's gone, and maybe both coaches get fired. But I'm going to go Satterfield 1, Harsin 2, even though in my video earlier this week I put Harsin at number 1.
Right, and I was looking at Louisville, thinking about their performance this year. Is it if they lose to Virginia, would they be 0-4 in the ACC?
Yes, they've lost to Florida State, Syracuse, and BC.
That's especially with how bad the ACC is. I feel like that's unacceptable for any program, especially with the caliber of teams they've been playing. And you said Virginia and Boston Colleges are the 2 worst teams in the ACC, if not Louisville in this discussion. Virginia Tech and Miami
got
to be in that discussion as well.
Well, Let's hold back on Miami just for another week here. Let's watch them play North Carolina. Miami's not played a game in the conference, so they're the only team they might be the only team in major college football that has yet to play a conference game. Anyway, they play a conference game against North Carolina. So despite how horrible they've looked, they are 0-0 in the ACC, and they've got new life and a new perspective, and they can still play for the division.
I mean, that's true, but in reality, I think everybody that's watched college football this year knows they have absolutely almost no chance.
In that division, I'm not so sure.
If you're getting out-athleted by Middle Tennessee, I mean, Pittsburgh's got better athletes.
Okay.
Georgia Tech probably even has better athletes than Middle Tennessee.
Well, let's understand that Miami or whomever wins the Coastal Division this year could look much like the Big Ten Western Division winner. They could be 8-4, 7-5. They could have that kind of look to their season because everybody's going to just beat against each other, and we're going to have the kind of outcome that we expect, like a 5-3 division winner. Understand that this has happened many times in that division because the teams have been bad. The winner's not been very good. Pitt last year was a nearly top 10 team that went to the Peach Bowl, and they lost to, was it East? I get them mixed up. Western Michigan. They lost to Western Michigan in the non-conference. We've had many winners come out of the ACC Coastal that lost to marginal group of 5 teams.
Yeah, that's sad and pathetic, but that's the reality of the situation.
It is both of those things, yes.
Yeah, but I mean, leads to something else entirely, but a 7-5 team should have absolutely no shot to make the college football playoff, regardless of any circumstance. I don't care if they win their conference at 8-5. You shouldn't be a playoff team. There should be a minimum threshold of how good you are. But that's a different topic for a different day.
Well, that's okay to have that topic right now. The only thing I will say is I understand your perspective. I don't argue against it. I'm not necessarily in agreement. I think the divisions or the conferences better structure themselves in a way that does not allow a 7-5 team to win the conference, because I don't want to see one of these goofy situations where some 7-5 team then goes 8-5 winning the conference championship, and then somebody steps in and says, we can't have this, we're going to legislate against it. No. You've got a conference set up. You've got to fix the structure of the conference to determine that the best teams in the conference get into the conference championship game, and just format the conference in such a way that you prohibit this. But otherwise, the way things are structured right now, I have no issue with Pitt going 7-5, winning the ACC championship game, and in the 12-team playoff proposal that they get in. I have no issue with it.
Well, you may not have an issue with it, but I'm a fan, and I like watching good football. And if an 8-5 team gets in, they're going to be probably the 11th seed, because the group of 5 champion is the group of 5 champion. They'll always probably be the 12th seed. So that game, the 12-5 matchup, is basically ruined every single year, because the 5 seed's going to dominate more times than not. I would be completely surprised if the 12 seed had any shot on planet Earth. And then if an 8-5 champion got in, well, there goes the 6-11 game as well. So now you're only down to 2 quality first round matchups at the most.
So I understand what you're saying about the 5-12 game, but for example, last year he would have had Utah as the lowest seed of the conference champions, a decent, good Utah team, but not devastating in any way, taking on the 12 seed, which in the college football playoff rankings, let's see if I can find them here, would have been Pitt. Well, that doesn't make sense because they were a conference champion as well. So So I'd have to rework this whole scenario, because it wouldn't, the playoff format would change the college football playoff rankings. So you would have somebody like, an Ole Miss playing a Utah as a 5-12 game last year.
Are you're saying last year?
Last year.
No, wouldn't it be the top 4 are the conference champions? They automatically get the bye.
Yeah.
And then
go ahead.
After that, it's the next best team. So that would have been Georgia.
Is it the next best team or is it the next conference champion?
No, it's the next best team. After I now somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's the next best team. That's why when the playoff bracket that Tony and them and the Patreon people voted on, it was Georgia at 5. And it wasn't a Utah type team.
Conference champion. Got it.
So more years than not, it's going to be either a Georgia, a Michigan, or an Ohio State, most likely as that 5 role playing the 12 team. And I don't see any of those teams with 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 week to prepare, losing to Cincinnati, UCF, or whoever as the 12th seed.
Okay. Under your scenario, I would tend to agree with you. I would like to see, and I did all this work. I wish I had it with me. But anyway, I went through all that at some point, and I thought those 5-12 matchups were pretty competitive during some of the last 10 years. There was another point we wanted to hit on. So our guy Jason serves this up. He says an 8-5 conference champion is unlikely to make a playoff. They have to be one of the 6 highest ranked conference champions. So, well, think of it this way. If we still have the 5 conferences, main conferences, and one of them is an 8-5 conference champion, let's say Pitt. So you've got the 4 other Power 5s that are definitely going to be ranked higher than them. Then you've got our 2 group of 5s going to be ranked higher. Let's say one will be, let's say a Cincinnati in the American Conference, but will a Mountain West champ that's Utah State last year, are they going to be ranked ahead of a major conference champion, even though they are 8-5?
Well, it's also really unlikely when you consider that the 8-5 team is guaranteed to beat a playoff team in their conference championship game. There isn't going to be a win that a Utah State or the Conference USA champion has that's even close to that one win.
Absolutely. The last time we had a major conference, a Power 5 champion with that type of record, unless somebody corrects me if I'm wrong, was 2005 Florida State. They had 5 losses. And,
well, I get it. It hasn't happened in forever, but the thing is, I don't care if it's unlikely to happen. I don't want it ever to happen. I don't think it should be a possibility.
Format the conferences in such a way that it doesn't happen. I'm not bothered by it.
I know you're not, because your goal, I think, is to determine a proper champion at the end of the season. And you want that by having equal representation among the Power 5 conference, or representation among the Power 5 conferences.
Absolutely.
It doesn't even have to be equal. Is that correct?
No, it does not have to be equal. There just has to be representation. Right now, a team can win a conference and they get left out of the playoffs, and I don't like that. I don't think that's just.
Well, see, the difference for me is I don't care about that stuff. The only thing I care about is watching good, competitive football. That's it. So it could be Oklahoma State Baylor for the title game. If it's 27-24, that's fine by me. It could be USC versus UCLA 31-34 in the national championship game. That's fine by me. So the representation matters none to me. I just want to see good football that's entertaining and played at a high level.
So you would be in better shape if you selected the playoff teams, or maybe I could select the playoff teams and then run it by you. So for example, last year, if we're just looking for entertainment and we're looking for the possibility of the best football games, then you know what I would have said at the end of last season, for as flawed as they were in certain ways, I would have said, you know what, we're not letting Cincinnati in the playoff. Take your choice between Ohio State, Oklahoma State, and Ole Miss, and we'll put them in the 4 spot.
Yeah, that's fine. I've mentioned it to you multiple times. I don't think a group of 5 teams deserves any spot at the playoffs at all because they are playing a completely different sport of football. So that's fine with me. If you want Ohio State versus Bama as your first round playoff semifinal game, that you're not going to hear any complaints from me.
Yeah, they might have gotten chewed up and spit out. It's possible, or we might have seen a great game. We would have been more likely to see a great game because we knew what we were going to see with Cincinnati.
Yeah. Exactly. And my fear is with that 12-5 matchup is you're going to see that exact type of game with Alabama-Cincinnati every single year because the Power 5 team is going to have more depth. They're going to be more talented, and they don't want to get hurt. So they're just going to hand off, run the ball 13 times, score a touchdown, and just keep running it. The quarterback will throw 14 to 17 passes, I'm guessing, and they'll get out with a 31-7 win. And everybody will look at the box score and be like, it was close. And then everybody who watched the game will be like, no, it was a complete blowout.
So does this bother you, or you're just saying that one game will not be competitive, but you're still good with the 6-11, the 7-10, the 8-9 are going to be most likely good games?
Well, it bothers me from the aspect that that's one game that's automatically taken off the table. There's the other games that depend on the matchups and selection. Because I don't think the 6-11 game will be that competitive. I think the 8-9 game has a really good chance of being competitive. The only fear I have is with the buys. It'll get to a place 6-7 years where the 8-9 team has never won against the 1 seed. So it's just an inevitability of, okay, who loses to Bama? Who loses to Georgia? Who loses to Michigan this year type thing. And I think that could take off some of the shine of the playoffs from that game.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
it's going to have to be proven otherwise, but it's going to have that feel going into it. And most likely that's what we're going to see until proven otherwise.
Right. And I think if you looked at the bracket Tony and Tim and all the Patreon people put up at the Pac-12 show and they voted on, I don't see how the Final Four isn't Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, or Michigan. And what do we think the 4 teams are? Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, or Michigan. So all I think we're doing is just going a longer path to get to the same place.
So what's your playoff scenario? What's your format that you want implemented?
Well, I wasn't the first to come up with this, but I've heard it from others. I think the +1 model is the best model out there. That way.
So it is an interesting model for the preservation of the integrity of the bowls, but also determining a national champion in a valid way. I kind of like it myself. So last year, and I wish I would keep all this paperwork, but I would have stacks of paperwork in front of me. But I've worked it out in terms of what the bowl system would have looked like last year. And then suddenly you bring value back to all these major bowl games on New Year's Day because you have to win that game to have a shot at being in the +1 game. So we would have had a Michigan-Utah Rose Bowl. We would have had an Alabama Pick Your Team Sugar Bowl. I think I had them against, I went by rankings. So who else goes to bowl games? If the ACC champ Pitt goes to the Orange Bowl, and let's say the Big 12 champion Oklahoma State goes to the Fiesta Bowl, and that's pretty much it. There's our 5 champions, right? Did I hit them all? And then you fill in the rest of the slots going by the rankings, I suppose.
Right. And I think the +1 model solves a bunch of different things. It solves what you mentioned, the bowl structure. It solves the players from sitting out on these major bowl games. because they'll have a perceived chance to make the national championship game. If you're the third or fourth or even fifth best team, all you need is a little bit of chaos in front of you, and then boom, you're in the playoffs or in the national championship game. Or if Ohio State beat Utah 45-0, for example, and it's just such an impressive showing that they're clearly deserve a shot in, then maybe they get the chance. Another thing I think it does is it gets rid of the stigma, I guess, of where these bowl games are going, because my concern is or not bowl games, regular season games. I'm concerned for Ohio State, Michigan in the future. I really am, as a rivalry. I think we're going to get to the point where players say, we're already sending out of postseason games. Why don't we sit out regular season games? Ohio State, Michigan is just one game. Now, I know it's the game and all that, but if you're Aiden Hutchinson, if you're J.J. McCarthy, C.J. Stroud, why does it matter to you? If you've got to play this game, you got to play a conference championship game, and then you got to play 3 or 4 more games after that. And you're all basically locked into the playoffs because you're 11-0.
You're absolutely right, because we look at it as these hallowed, sacred games. Some of them do. Some of them grew up as college football fans and loving their team or whatever. So there's a little part of that. So I'm not going to discount that. But generally, they look at it as they're businessmen. This is their profession. And what's their profession all about? It's getting to the NFL draft in good shape. So if they've put enough on film, they don't need to put any more on film. They've already shown us and shown the NFL scouts, then what's the incentive? And I think they're competitors and they want to win and they love their teammates and all that, but they're weighing that against there's possible injury and this could hurt my draft stock.
Right, because they see what Matt Corral, John Mechie, Jamison Williams did all in postseason games.
Yep.
And their stock had I would say had some effect in all 3 cases. You can't tell me NFL scouts and GMs are looking at thinking he's hurt. That's a big question mark. Some players never come back the same. And we all hate injuries, but it's just an unfortunate reality of the game of football. So that's a major concern I have. And if you're asking people to play 17 games, which is a full NFL regular season, but not getting NFL money or anywhere close to it.
Yeah, I think it's, again, we're going to get into a playoff system where we're all going to be excited and think these matchups are going to be phenomenal and we want to see more great football and all of that's great, but it's not a video game. It's played with flesh and blood on a field with guys colliding against each other. And if somebody's going to look at a situation where I got to play 4 more games, and not just 4 more games, we're not playing 4 more games against Rutgers or Southern Illinois, an FCS team, week 2. They're not against an FCS school, a group of 5 school, and then maybe one conference game that's against one of the worst teams in the Big Ten or the ACC. You're playing 4 of the 12 best teams in the country. The guys hit harder, they're faster, they're stronger, all of that. You're playing 4 high intensity games.
And I think for the group of 5 team and the 11 seed and the 10 seed, you're making it harder for them to win the net. You're basically still giving them no shot to win it because they would still have to go against Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, back to back weeks more than likely. There isn't a team I can think of that can win those 3 games back to back because it's just too much. It's too much blood, sweat, and tears to do it, to mentally prepare for Alabama. And then, we got to play Georgia the next week. It's too much. You need too much depth, too much skill, too much coaching. No team can do it.
You're right. So I'd like to do one thing here. So we got a +1 set up from last season. So this isn't down to a T, but this is roughly what the matchups would have looked like in the bowl game. So I got the 6 major bowl games, the 6 New Year's 6 games. You tell me who's going to win these games, because I've slotted the conference champions, and then I've gone basically through the rankings and put the lowest ranked against the number 1 and on down the line. So in the sugar, we've got Bama and Baylor.
Bama.
Okay.
Big.
Rose Bowl, Michigan, Utah.
Michigan.
Fiesta Bowl, Oklahoma State, Notre Dame.
Oklahoma State.
Orange Bowl, Pitt, Ohio State.
Ohio State.
Peach Bowl, Georgia, Michigan State.
Georgia.
And the Cotton Bowl, I know you don't like this, Cincinnati and Ole Miss. Or we would have had, if we kick out the group of 5, I guess, it would have been like Oregon. Ouch. Anyway, Cincinnati and Ole Miss.
Ole Miss.
Okay. So now, who's going to play in the national championship game? This is our only issue here. We've got Bama. They're 13-1. Michigan's 13-1. Oklahoma State has 2 losses. And of course, Georgia. We got this log jam with, you can forget Ohio State and Oklahoma State because they've lost 2 games, and Ole Miss would be a 2-loss team as well. So you got a log jam, Bama, Michigan, Georgia.
I'll make this simple.
Yes.
Bama beat Georgia. Bama's in, Michigan's in.
Okay. There you go. That's what would have happened there. Yeah, in your next scenario in this 12-team playoff, my goodness, if it was, again, we're not going to go through the craziness, but let's say Pitt was the 12 seed. They would have to beat Georgia, the 5. Let's say they win the game. Nobody would have expected that, but let's say they win the game. Then they're in an 8-team playoff, and I guess they're playing Bama next?
They would play the 4 seed if they played the 5
seed.
So I would go with Southern Cal.
No, we're talking about last year.
Oh, last year?
Yeah.
Who was the 4 seed?
Well, they would play Cincinnati but they would play the 4 seed of the conference. I guess they might have been the 4 seed. The seeds would have went Bama, Michigan, Oklahoma State, Pitt. So forget Pitt. I don't know who the 12. I would have been somebody like Utah, or BYU was ranked 13th.
Okay, so it looks like the 4 top champions would be Bama, Michigan, Cincinnati, Baylor. Cincinnati covers the group of 5.
Oklahoma State.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you're right. Baylor beat Oklahoma State. No. Yeah. Baylor beat Oklahoma State. I'm sorry, I mixed that up. Baylor beat Oklahoma State. Go ahead.
So those would be your 4 teams that get a bye.
Yes.
And then next would be Georgia as the 5 seed.
Okay.
Notre Dame is the 6 seed.
Okay.
And then Ohio State's the 7 seed.
Yep.
Ole Miss the 8 seed.
Yep.
Oklahoma State's the 9 seed. Michigan State's the 10 seed. Utah's the 11 seed. Pittsburgh's the 12 seed.
Okay. So it is Pitt. That's how I had it. So Pitt, Georgia, we're going to go the unthinkable, and Pitt wins this game. Then they've got to play Baylor.
Yeah, they got to play Baylor next.
4 or 5. Let's say they win. Let's say the rest is chalk. Now they're playing the 1, correct?
Yep, they're playing Alabama.
That's the semifinal game?
That is correct.
Yes. Say they win, then they're playing probably Michigan, I guess. If it's chalk.
There's no team that could go through those 4 games and win all of them in back-to-back.
Georgia,
in my opinion.
Baylor, Bama, Michigan. Yeah. That would be rough.
You could even have like the previous, like Clemson, whenever they won a national championship, and just put that team into the 12 seed. I don't think they would even do it.
I think the only teams that would have a chance of doing it would be some of the great teams we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years. LSU 19, Bama 20, maybe Ohio State in 14, maybe Bama in 15. Yeah. And that would even be, the chance of a slip up against another great team. Yeah, that's a rough go. That's a rough go.
Yeah. So basically that team has no shot, and by proxy, all the other matchups of the 8-9, the 7-10, and the 6-11, they have no shot to win the national championship because of the exact same problems.
So what do you want?
I said the +1 model.
Oh, you want the +1. Yeah, I love it from the standpoint of preserving college football tradition and making the bowl games meaningful again. That would be tremendous to be watching Sugar Bowl, Rose Bowl, all those games on New Year's Day and being like, you got to win. You got to win. And I just think that we might have some scenarios so the scenario I just played out for you, fortunately, you had a head-to-head matchup to fall back on. There would be many times where you wouldn't have that, and that would be a difficult decision.
I understand that, but I still think most years you would have 2 decisive teams, if you don't have a head-to-head matchup.
I'd have to go. That's going to be our first off-season project. Is we're going to go through the last, 10 years or whatever, and do the +1. Or how about a semifinal? How about a playoff? And that might be a little bit too much. Or it's less than what we're being proposed right now. If we had a +4, if we had a not a +4, +2, if we had a semifinal out of that.
So yeah, I don't think we need a plus anything. I think the things you need to fix is the bowl structure, and the next most important thing is the parity among the top teams. I think if you fix the parity among the teams, because this is setting up to be a.
Who's supposed to fix that though? That's up to people that's up to the universities and the programs to fix.
Oh, that's nobody's fault.
That's not
It's just one of those unfortunate realities where there's a select group of teams that is clearly better than everybody else. And what I think the college football fans and public and media are trying to do is try to get new blood into the national championship game. So they're going to throw a bunch of teams out there. And then what's going to really happen is we're going to see this massive gap between Alabama and Utah. And that's only going to create the perception even more that, oh, these are really 2 different classifications of football.
Yeah, beyond the other classification of football.
Right. We're gonna have 2 classifications, G5 to P5 and P5 to Bama.
So your +1 is not going to correct that. It's only going to make New Year's Day important again.
Right, because I'm not trying to I don't think it's a problem that Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State are the 4 best teams. My goal is to embrace it. This playoff format, in my opinion, is trying to destroy that.
Yeah, well, I would love to get back to the 1980s when if you picked up a preseason publication, you didn't know who the top 15 teams in the country were going to be. It was all jumbled up every year. It was different all the time. You didn't pick it up like you do now. And every year it's some order of Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, and Clemson are your top 4 teams in the country every year in some order. And then it actually plays itself out to be exactly that. I know this is way beyond you in terms of your age, but in the 1980s, my goodness, if you looked at the SEC every year, you didn't know if Auburn was going to win, Alabama was going to win, LSU was going to win, Tennessee was going to win. You had no idea. You had really not any idea 1984, 85, 86, 87 that you didn't know. You didn't know who was going to win the Big Ten. Ohio State, Michigan, Illinois would win the Big Ten. Iowa would win the Big Ten. Michigan State would win the Big Ten. Those teams have no shot.
Well, Mark, I heard BYU was really good in one of those years that you listed off.
Well, sure, because they beat the, 97th best schedule in college football.
Yeah, I know. I'm just having a little fun with you, but there's going to be a great set of games tomorrow.
Yes.
I believe the top seeds are going to all blow out the bottom seeds as usual, unfortunately. Hopefully Kentucky gets a W, and then we'll look forward to taking our beating against Tennessee and Georgia coming down the line.
Thanks to Real. Appreciate it. All right, let's keep it going here at the Voice of College Football. We got Chris, we got Jordan. We'll knock out these calls. And again, we kind of dove into something that probably didn't necessarily bore anyone. I hope not, but we should have like complimentary graphics to go along with it. And we'll attack all these things as we do each and every off season. Chris, what's going on tonight?
Oh, I just was going to get your angle, I guess, on something I guess you kind of already talked about. And I don't, like I say, if it's something you said people don't want to talk about, then we can move on. But did I understand correctly that you were going to replace Cincinnati with Mississippi in the championship last season? Was that kind of one of the things you thought was? I didn't quite understand exactly what you were trying to say, but
the caller stated that the Group of Five is in no way close to the Power Five, and therefore he does not believe that any of them should be involved in the playoff.
Well, just for clarification purposes or whatever, I'm doing what I think is a pretty good survey, I guess. Of when I've sent it to you, so I don't know if you've got a chance to look at it, but I think I have the American right under. They are underperforming, but they're still the top conference as far as G5. So Cincinnati wouldn't necessarily be outside that, whatever that range, I guess. I'm not trying to like push Cincinnati on you, but I think they actually were a top, I don't know what range it would cover necessarily, but I think they were a good pick. I don't think that was a bad thing for them to be in it.
I think they earned it to a certain extent, that they went undefeated. They played Notre Dame. They won the game. But you can't compare their schedule versus a legitimate Power Five schedule. It's not even close.
Yeah.
They just –
well,
they're messing around. Like last year, they were messing around every week with Navy and Tulane. And, you can't compare that to a team in one of the Power Five conferences and who they have to play week after week after week after week. It's not even –
Well, I guess I can understand that, but as far as though where they perform though, the American's actually one of the better. If you had to pick a team from a conference, I think you could do. You can't really do much better than the American. Is kind of where I don't know that there was another team that would have been.
In the last 10 years, that conference has played the best against the Power Five. Absolutely.
I don't know necessarily that they're as good as probably not necessarily as good as a P5. If that was your point, I guess I might even agree with you. That maybe they could have put like a Baylor or was it Baylor that won the Big 12? I thought it was.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that might not have been a bad thing, except that I think that Baylor had 2 losses, though, wasn't it? I think they kind of had a.
Correct.
Okay. Well, that would be.
I'm sorry. The American Conference this year is 3-14 against the Power Five.
Yeah. Well, that's not very good. No, I tend to agree with you on some of it. I just seem to think though that. We don't necessarily want to leave them out, though. If you have a team like, I don't know who it would be necessarily, but like, for example, Air Force, if they hadn't lost to Wyoming, which they did, but I'm not saying they would necessarily make it much of a challenge, but I think if we have a team like that, though, I don't know that we want to necessarily just leave them out just because they're in the Mountain West, even though the Mountain West isn't especially very good. I understand that.
Well, here's my claim, Chris, and you can let me know if you agree with this. I would just make a playoff system where we either formally include the Group of Five, the best Group of Five team, or we completely exclude the Group of Five and tell them to go play their own playoff. One or the other. I don't like this wishy-washy, depends on the committee and who they rank. No, either include their best team or exclude the entire level of play.
Well, I tend to agree with you, except that I think last year, I don't know that was necessarily a bad thing to include Cincinnati. I think
I said either formally include them or exclude them. One or the other decision.
Yeah, I know that they still have a ways to go, but I think at least you're giving them the option to being, if they go into the season knowing they're not going to have any opportunity, I don't know that that's a very good option for these kids that are. I mean, I'm not in their shoes, I guess, but I would think that if they go into the season knowing right off the top of that they're not going to have an opportunity, I don't know that that's really a good thing, is it?
No, sir, it's not. I completely 100% agree with you.
Okay, and if you don't mind, the other question I was going to have, and like we said, we've already kind of talked about it, but I guess I'm still a little confused about what your objections were. I understand that there were several teams, I guess, on any given year that might have made a challenge. I mean, we could talk about a 98 or whatever, but I still don't understand. I was under the impression that the BCS actually, as far as picking a champion, I always kind of thought that it was kind of hard to say that the team that won wasn't necessarily I mean, if you can think of a season where there was one, I guess maybe I'll have to reevaluate, but I honestly don't remember a season where there was an undeserving BCS champion. I guess that's kind of where I'm confused.
Okay. Maybe I haven't been clear on this point. I have less issue with the BCS than I do the number of teams included. Like if you took the BCS in any given year and said, we're going to have an 8-team playoff and we're going to use the BCS system, then I would have to review that 1 through 8 list each year to see, because I believe the conference champions should be included in the playoff.
Right.
But most likely they would be included in the playoff in all those years. I'm sure there would be some outliers. 2005 Florida State was an 8-4 team. They would be excluded under the BCS, but most of the time, 90% of the time, they would include all the conference champions. So I had more issue with the lack of inclusion and just limiting it to 2 teams, because really, Chris, I think that the more playoff teams that we include, I'm not saying the more the better, but the more that we include, the more we could take you, we could take me, we could take Jordan, who's waiting, we could take any knowledgeable college football fan. The more we expanded the list,
right?
And you could come up with the list. Like if we all at the end of this season said we're going to have a 16-team playoff, and we're going to take our 100 most knowledgeable college football fans, and we all are going to list the 16 teams that we believe should be in the playoff, we're almost going to be exact.
Yeah, I don't even know that that's even a question. I think, in fact, that was the other point I was going to ask you, and I don't know how closely you follow this, but I know the BCS has been retired for quite a while, but
yes,
I don't know if you're aware of this or not. It's called BCS Know-How. It's just basically and it can't be the same because they don't think they have the same, but it gives basically the same thing. And I guess my point with it is, apparently there's really no difference, I think, in terms of which teams have advanced. As far as I'm not saying that the BCS would have included 4, but I don't know if you knew that the same 4 teams that went to the playoff were the same 4 teams that finished in the top 4. It's kind of the same. I mean, I don't think they're not necessarily the same position, but so there really hasn't been any, as far as I can tell, any disagreement between what the BCS poll might have done and what the CFP committee has done. I didn't know if you were aware of that.
So you're saying that the BCS formula in these 8 playoff years would have selected the same 4 teams as the playoff committee each year?
Well, the same what is it? The same value or metric that they apply with us. I think they have to substitute a poll. Besides, they had the coaches, and I think they had to substitute the Associated Press poll, but yeah, I guess they get the same result, or not necessarily in the same order, but the same field of teams, I guess, same 4 teams. And then I think that's good, because I think it says that, if nothing else, I think it says that we can probably trust the result to give the right result as far as the title game.
Well, I have never criticized the committee from this standpoint, even though I think I know that they changed their stated criteria. They have been very inconsistent because they box themselves into a corner, then they have to explain themselves. And so they have changed their, at least public, declaration of their criteria through the years. So my issue is not with the committee. I think that they've done a reasonably good job. They don't explain themselves well, and they change their criteria, but their final decision has always been reasonable. I've never had a huge issue with any of their final decisions. I have an issue with the format. So, for example, in 2018, I have an issue when Ohio State's 13-1 with a conference championship and Oklahoma's 13-1 with a conference championship, and one of them has to be left out of the playoff in favor of the other one. I think that's an impossible decision to make, and it's unfair to the team that was left out. In this case, Ohio State. I would be arguing, for all those people that think I'm just arguing for Ohio State, I would be making the same exact argument if Ohio State would have been included and Oklahoma would have been excluded, just like I was in 2014, that I think it was unfair to the Big 12 champion to be left out of the playoff. That's my issue.
And I guess I can understand that, but I'm not exactly sure what they use as far as the criteria, but I think didn't Oklahoma, was that the year they got beat pretty bad? I can't.
Yes.
One year they didn't get beat pretty bad, but one year they got beat kind of bad. I don't remember. Yeah. But, it doesn't really matter. I just that's neither here nor there. But I guess my point might be just that it kind of fixed itself, I guess, maybe, or unless you think that Ohio State might have done better, which I guess that's possible. I'm not going to say that's not possible.
How does it fix itself? I never understood that statement.
Well, I just mean in terms of I kind of look at it like even if
Ohio State had no chance to prove that they could win the national championship. How did it fix itself? We don't know.
Well, that's true, I guess, but it was still Alabama and Clemson, though, wasn't it?
That was, yes, Alabama, Clemson. Correct.
Yeah. Well, I mean, those are kind of. I'm sorry. I just kind of have the opinion that's probably who it would have been, but that's just my opinion.
Well, it's my opinion too. I believe that Alabama and Clemson would have still played in the national championship game in 2018, but my opinion shouldn't matter. Our opinion should matter. We should be able to watch the teams play on the field, and they determine who the best team is, not our opinions.
Okay. Kind of like what I was trying to tell you before, and we've already talked about it, but I still have an opinion that I think like I said, and it isn't necessarily, we've already kind of got rid of the BCS, but I just kind of think that it was the right, at least for the time we had it, I'll leave it at that, because I mean, you made good arguments for the playoff moving forward and all that, but I think for the time we had it, I can't really say that they ever really did it wrong. I mean, you might have a difference of opinion on that, but I just personally don't think that they ever got it wrong. I mean, I know that you think maybe they did, but you mentioned several years where they thought maybe they got it wrong, but I don't know that you really can get it wrong if you have one team that finishes number one. It's kind of where I'm coming from on that.
Well, obviously somebody's going to finish number one. You can still get it wrong, and just because there's a team, just because we have two teams playing in a championship game doesn't mean that they got it right. Obviously, as long as there's a championship game played, then somebody's going to finish number one. That doesn't mean the BCS or any system got it right. If I had a system and I declared today that Wisconsin and Auburn are playing in the national championship game, that doesn't mean that my system's right just because we're going to have a championship game with a team that's going to win the game. But my point about the BCS, Chris, is not necessarily that it got it wrong in any particular years, even though and one night, Chris, we'll bring you on here. We'll go through every year of the BCS, and I will outline for you what I believe was correct or incorrect. But it's not so much that I thought it got it wrong, but that there were teams excluded that had just as much of a resume and just as much of a valid claim to be in that game as one of the teams that was in the game.
Sure.
For example, 2013, Auburn's playing in the national championship game,
right,
as an SEC champion with one loss.
Sure.
Michigan State is not playing in the national championship game as a Big Ten champion with one loss. And if you look at the resumes,
they made it to the Rose Bowl. I don't know how that's a. If that's a competition,
you've stated this before, Chris, and I understand it's great to go to the Rose Bowl, but that's not the national championship.
Okay.
It's the Rose Bowl.
Sure.
And in 1985, that would have been phenomenal, but in 2013, that's a consolation prize.
I guess
that's not the championship. These guys, we're trying to determine the championship.
Well, no, I guess and again, I'm not trying to interrupt you, Mark, and I actually, whether you believe it or not, I actually have a very high opinion of you.
Well, I appreciate that. I have a high opinion of you too. You have a depth of college football knowledge and historical knowledge and so forth. I just don't always agree with your system.
Well, you don't have.
I still don't even have a handle on what it is, but
well, I'm not sure I do either. So, but anyway, I guess my point is with the BCS. I guess if we're saying that, we dug on it, we're out in the Rose Bowl. We don't get, if that's really the state of the football, I don't know. That's kind of a reflection on I just kind of think that's a pretty sad reflection on the way things are. Well, that's really the way it is. Well, isn't that's the top prize, I thought.
Chris, if you're a competitor, it's not the top prize. We're not living in 1985. It's not the top prize. The top prize is going to play in the national championship game.
Yeah.
And if you're a competitor and you believe your team's the best and you want to prove that you're the best, you would have an issue with being relegated to another bowl and watching two other teams that don't have any better credentials than you do playing in a championship game.
Well, no, but I guess where I'm coming from on that, though, Mark, it's just that, it was Auburn, right? Auburn and Florida State.
Yes.
I kind of think that whether it was by design or whatever, I'm not so sure that isn't the way it should have been regardless. I know that there might be arguments for any number of teams that maybe didn't go. But, like I said, if the end result of it is you end up playing Stanford in the Rose Bowl, I don't know that there's a whole lot you can really say is wrong with that, but that's just my opinion.
I can say it's wrong because Auburn was 13-1 and won the SEC championship. Michigan State was 13-1 and won the Big Ten championship, and they had comparable resumes. And just by happenstance, by some BCS formula, Auburn gets to go play for the championship and Michigan State doesn't. That's not fair. It's not right. Well, I'm not saying Michigan State was better. If Michigan State had been selected and not Auburn, I'd be saying the same thing about Auburn. That they should have had an opportunity on the field to play for the championship.
Well, no, but again, Mark, and I'm just looking at it from just my own perspective, which might be a little off kilter, but to get there, they had to beat Alabama, and that wasn't the only game they had to win. They had to beat Missouri, and I think that was probably wasn't that better resume? Maybe it was by resume. I don't know. Kind of a better resume as far as the people they had to beat to get there.
Well, we can squabble over the resumes. Of course, they weren't exact, but the point is that they were comparable.
Well, I guess my point is I don't know that what the objection is a big objection because they got to play Stanford. I think they actually beat Stanford, didn't they?
Yes.
So they did get a championship. It just wasn't the national championship. So, I don't know how that's such a bad deal for anybody, really. You've won the Rose Bowl. That's something you can tell your grandchildren about.
Absolutely. It's a tremendous accomplishment.
There you go. That's kind of where I'm coming from there on that. That's just what I think. I think
absolutely. It's a tremendous accomplishment to win one college football game. Does that
That's about all I had to say about it. So,
all right, Chris. Well, I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
All right. Jordan, how's it going tonight?
Going good, Mark. Going good. Wow, that was an interesting call. I want to kind of transition to something a little less like big picture. It's a question that's been nagging at me for about 3 weeks now, and I can't seem to get it out of my head, and it's really important pertaining to my team specifically.
Yeah.
I want to get your thoughts on it. Is Syracuse good?
Well, Jordan, if you've watched me at all, my next question is going to be define good.
And you see that's the problem, because it's when you're talking the ACC and how it really and how they compare to the rest of college football. It's like, well, what's our definition of good? Because they're undefeated, and that goes a long way. That should be taken into account. But they have gotten by. They've been skating by in a lot of their games recently. They probably should have lost to Purdue.
Yep.
probably. I mean, Virginia was in doubt, and we know Virginia is not very good right now. I guess if I had to put a definition on it, so is Syracuse capable? It's probably easier to just put a win on it, or like a win total on it. Can Syracuse win 9-10 games?
Okay. Can they win 9 games? So they're at how many games in the ACC? Are they 2-0?
I believe so. They beat Louisville
and Virginia.
And Virginia.
Yeah. So they've yet to play any of the big boys, of course. Clemson, NC State. They will have to play Wake. They will have to play Florida State. That's 4. They should, under your definition, they have to beat BC, of course. Then they've got Pitt in the other division, and then I don't know what their other game is that rotates in the Coastal, but they're going to need.
They already played it. It was Virginia.
Oh, yeah. That means that they have to beat one of the 4 of. So I will liken this Syracuse team possibly to the Syracuse team that we saw in 2018.
I remember them well. Yes.
Yes.
Eric Dungy.
Was that team good? If you looked at their record, yes, they were good. They got to play a West Virginia team in a bowl game that was without Will Greer and one of their playmakers on the outside. I can't remember who, and their left tackle, who was an NFL draft selection. So anyway, West Virginia was a bit gutted, and Syracuse won the game, finished 10-3, 6-2, but they lost to Notre Dame 36-3. They really didn't beat anyone that good, aside from, of course, that was, of course, the 2017 team beat Clemson. Of course, that was the Chase Bryce game, correct?
Yeah.
Against Clemson.
Yes,
Chase Bryce had to come in,
Bryce game,
pass on 4th down.
Yeah.
Yep. So they gave Clemson a scare. To their credit, that was a really good game. But other than that, it was kind of paper thin, 10-3 season. I don't think that they were really that good, but they managed the schedule. They got through.
And they lost to that. They also lost to, I think they lost to that 7-7 Pitt team that won the Coastal.
Yes.
Got housed by Clemson, and then can't remember who they played in the bowl game, but that was just it was weird to finish with a 7-7 record. But I always remember that Pitt team.
Yeah. So I liken, from a quality standpoint, this Syracuse team to that Syracuse team. So they could, let's say they knock off Florida State, but they get drubbed by NC State, Clemson, and Wake, and they finish 9-3, and they get by in those other games. They beat Pitt by a field goal, and they, so by a razor close margin, they continue to do what they're doing, but they get exposed by the teams that they should get exposed by, and they finish the season 9-3. Well, that looks good. That's a really good record. They're going to be 9-3, and there's going to be other teams in the country that are going to be really good that are 9-3, but Syracuse isn't going to be one of them. So I think this is one of the 40 to 45 best teams in the country. I think they're in that range.
I tend to agree. And I mean, it's really surreal just, seeing a number next to their name, and you're just like, and they keep getting, they keep finding ways to win. It's really weird.
And my number next to their name is much higher than everybody else's. That doesn't mean that I believe that they're that good, but it's a resume. And I even go back to, and if you recall the Virginia game, Brendan Armstrong made a bad read on 4th down at the end of that game. He had a wide open guy in the flat to pick up the 1st down to set up a field goal to win the game, and he went for like some crazy double coverage pass, and he just missed the guy in the flat, didn't see him. Or I don't know how good Virginia's kicker is. I know he kicked a game winner against Liberty, but most likely they're in the dome. He's going to kick the game winner. And if and Jordan, this is how I kind of draw conclusions of games sometimes, that if Virginia was in exactly the same situation, but Syracuse would have covered up that receiver, and they also would have come off the edge and strip sacked Brennan Armstrong, or just because of coverage would have forced him into a bad throw or to throw it away or whatever, then I credit Syracuse for making a play to win the game. In that case, Brennan Armstrong just didn't see the guy, and Syracuse just lucked into him not completing a ball for 12 or 15 yards that would have set up the game-winning field goal. And so they didn't make a play. They got lucky. Otherwise, Virginia probably beats them.
Yeah, and there are people that they have like those luck ratings and like their power ratings and stuff. I'd be really interested to see where Syracuse falls on that list, because it does seem like they've they have a couple blowout wins, but they've been in some tight ball games, and they're just skating by, and it's really weird. And to your point about Virginia, I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because it's just been really mind-boggling, the regression on offense, with granted new offensive line group, pretty much completely different offensive line group, but same quarterback, same receivers, like all the same receivers, like nobody's gone, and a couple guys are back. It's been really puzzling just to see them struggle as bad as they have. I mean, I don't know how much you've watched of Virginia, but like, what do you, I mean, other than, the offensive line issues, it's like, why have they looked so poor? Obviously, it's also a new coaching staff, but why they look so bad?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's the same. I've thought the same exact thing. That's been my same thought process about Virginia football, because I thought, when Sam Hartman went down prior to the season and we didn't know what his situation was, I thought of him and Brennan Armstrong as not being the best quarterbacks in the country, but the most important quarterbacks in the country to their teams, the most valuable players to their teams, because Brennan Armstrong passed for the most yards per game last season.
Yep.
And they were phenomenal. And the game that slapped me in the face was they go to Illinois with, again, the same quarterback and same receivers.
Housed them last year, destroyed them last year.
That game, I remember for some reason they kicked off at like 11 a.m. for some reason. There was something going on. 11 a.m. So I watched the first quarter of that game, and all was going on where receivers were running wide open and Brennan Armstrong was carving up Illinois. Yeah, it was just a complete annihilation. Threw for like 430, 5 touchdowns. This year, they go to Illinois. He throws for like $130, couple picks. They don't even score a touchdown.
Right.
And I'm like, what is going on? They need a last-second field goal to beat Liberty. They only put up 16 points. We got this Syracuse game. They only put up 20. That's the only game I watched. So I haven't seen them other than that game against Syracuse.
They nearly lost to Old Dominion. They put up 16 on Old Dominion.
Oh, that's the game I'm thinking of. Not Liberty. It was Old Dominion. Yeah. Where they put up the last-second field goal. Yeah.
And his regression has been just really strange to see. And their wide receivers, guys like Dontavian Wicks was an 1,000-yard receiver last year.
Yeah.
And now I think he leads the ACC in drops. And, it's, among Clemson fans, there's still a lot of, I wouldn't say there's still some negative feelings left over from the Tony Elliott era. There were a lot of things that he did that Clemson fans weren't a fan of, and I don't know how much of a connection it is that as soon as Tony Elliott leaves and goes to Virginia, all of a sudden Virginia's offense falls off a cliff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really been one of the most shocking stories in the ACC, and as a whole, the conference's quarterbacks in general, it's kind of been topsy-turvy. Like a lot of the quarterbacks we expected to be at or near the top of the conference have been underperforming. Like Tyler Van Dyke as well at Miami, and Devin Leary hasn't been bad, but he was preseason player of the year. He's just been so. And then guys that people weren't so high on, like Jordan Travis, and obviously DJ was coming off a pretty awful year. They're balling, playing lights out. Garrett Schrader at Syracuse.
Yeah.
So I don't know what to think anymore with this conference. It's like nothing is given. But it's just been it's a really interesting conference race.
And when you brought up Brendan Armstrong and his struggles in the offense, it
Right.
also brought me back to one of these kind of off-season, what the ACC network, the SEC, the Big Ten, they put together those little kind of mini documentaries, and they talked to Brendan Armstrong, and just him going through the conversation he had with Tony Alford and deciding whether to go into the NFL draft. And he just had such a desire to come back, thought that they could really make a push to the ACC championship game, and just felt kind of bad for him. I thought, that this has not worked out.
No, it is not. And just it's going to be a really, really interesting, especially in the Coastal. Just that is a dumpster fire of a division right now. Who do you think comes out?
I think North Carolina comes out.
Yeah, me and you are on the same page.
Yeah.
And you don't feel great. I mean, nobody feels great about North Carolina. It's just they probably have the best unit of any team in the coast. They have a great offense, obviously a horrendous defense. But if you can put up points, you'll on most teams you play. You got a good shot to win every week. But
yeah, and when I see their performance on defense against Virginia Tech, I think that's more so Virginia Tech in aptitude on offense. But I do think, okay, are they, because as you've stated, we've had this conversation, they have talent on defense.
Yes.
Are they starting to, again, I lay 90% at that on Virginia Tech's deplorable offense, but maybe they are improving. Maybe.
I got to see, and that's the thing, because and it kind of goes back to Tyler Van Dyke and Miami struggles. It's like, well, even if North Carolina has a good defensive performance this week, you're still kind of like, well, I mean, Miami's offense has been pretty pedestrian, through 5 weeks. So I mean, we don't really know, but it's possible. But man, Drake May. I mean, as long as he's playing like he's playing, they're going to have a chance in every game. I think does he already have 20 passing touchdowns? I think he does, which is pretty insane. 20 touchdowns, like 1 pick, and I think he's already he's already 10th or something all time in UNC passing touchdowns, and he's he started 5 games, which that just tells you everything you need to know. Last thing before I get off, and Daryl is asking me about it. Do you think Scott Satterfield is toast?
Yeah, I do. There's a mathematical possibility that he survives if his team can turn it around and beat teams that they're not supposed to beat, but they're already losing to teams that they're not supposed to lose. So that turnaround would be phenomenal. So yeah, I do think he's toast, because they're 2-3 right now,
something like that. Yeah,
so they've beaten UCF and somebody who's another G5. No good.
They were fortunate to win that UCF. UCF lost that game more than Louisville won it. When just watching it,
there was a pick in the end zone with about 2.5 minutes left. UCF was about to score. Yeah, John Rice Plumlee threw a pick. I don't know where he was going. Anyway, so they're looking at a pretty rough road here. So they got Virginia, sure. They have to win that game.
Yeah.
But man, after that, they still have Clemson, NC State, Wake, Kentucky, just in terms of an overall record, because obviously the ACC is out of sight. So do they win 2 to 3 more? Yeah. If he goes 5-7, it's going to be tough for them to finish 3-4 the last 7 games to get to 5 I think it's done.
and I legitimately thought this was a year, like just from everything I'd heard, like the confidence that was coming out of Louisville, like I think they genuinely felt like this was the best team that Scott Satterfield has had, and it has not come together. The defense, couldn't stop Boston College.
Yeah,
and that's a whole nother can of worms.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only thing I could see that saves him is the recruiting class that he's put together.
Yeah.
But you gotta think, it's like at a certain point, it's like, if it's, I mean, how confident are you that, this recruiting class is going to make all the difference and you're going to start seeing the results that you want? Because I don't know how you underperform this badly with a quarterback like Malik Cunningham, with the talent you've had at the skill positions. Like, they develop really well on the offensive line more often than not. Louisville is one of the most puzzling teams in the conference, because it's like every year it's like, man, this is the year. They're a dark horse for the Atlantic. They can contend. This is the year, and it's ever since Scott Satterfield's first season, it's just been disappointment over and over and over again. And I think it's just time to rip the Band-Aid off and get somebody else, because it's not working.
The more we get into this NIL era, the more administrations are going to have to determine, in a situation like Louisville, where I still think recruiting is about building relationships and grinding and hustling and doing all those things, but flashing the facilities and the rings if you have them and all that business. But the more NIL becomes a deal that, regardless of who the coach is, the university has built this NIL collective and built those relationships and been able to make that a benefit to recruits. So they got to figure, has Satterfield really upped his game and his coaching staff are going out and building this recruiting class, or is this our NIL collective, and whoever we plug in here is going to have the same benefit and be able to do this? So maybe even the recruiting class isn't a gold star on his resume.
Well, and I tend to agree. And considering who they have in the class, Pierce Clarkson, who played tonight for St. John Bosco. He's the son of Steve Clarkson. And he's a big name as out west quarterback coach. He runs a camp. Louisville has a ton of alumni connections out west. I don't think people realize how expansive their alumni network is, but they've got a lot of people and they've got some wealthy people in a lot of different places. But and Pierce Clarkson is in the class, and obviously having his dad's connections, they have a ton of West Coast kids in that class, highly touted West Coast kids, and it's not hard to see why Louisville's class is the way, because Scott you go back and look at Scott Satterfield's classes before this past season, pre-NIL and all that, this wasn't even close to top 15. So does the class stay together if Satterfield is fired? Who knows? But I think you gotta rip the Band-Aid off regardless. But it'll be interesting. There was a report that came out that that the Virginia, if I don't know how true it is, but if Louisville loses the Virginia game, that they could make a move. But I think that's silly. I mean, if you're going to fire him, just go ahead and fire him. I don't get the, man, if you don't win this game, this is when it's going to happen.
Yeah. If you've determined he's not the guy to run our program, then regardless of whether the team plays a decent game and beats Virginia, or they play a little less decent game and they lose to Virginia, you're deciding a coach's fate based on a couple drives of a game. You either won 23-20 or you lost 23-20, and you're really going to make that your deciding factor in keeping a coach around for another week or two or a month or whatever. Yeah.
Asinine. I hope that's not true, because that's as far as running an athletic program, that's not how you should.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that same report about Brian Harsin. Yeah, that's a very, very silly way to go about doing things.
That's where perception and public relations comes into it a little bit too much, where it looks bad if you've just fired a coach who just won a game. And I get that. But again, you've made the determination. He's proven not to be the guy. So beating Virginia, that's your standard. You just beat maybe the worst team in the conference by a field goal. So what did that prove?
Yeah, congratulations, I guess. All right, Mark. Thanks for the call. You guys, make sure if you haven't already, hit that like button, hit the notification bell, so you guys know when Mark goes live. And if you guys haven't already, please, consider joining Patreon. It is a awesome place. You get access to a lot of. I know we harp on about the Discord and all that, but you get tons of other features. It's really a great time. And we're really trying to build this community. So if it's $5 a month. If you got that to spare, that'd be awesome. And you get to talk college football 24/7 with me and with Tim. A lot of guys that you see in the chat right now. And Mark is, and you obviously get to interact with Mark as well. So it's a great time. So please consider it if you haven't already. Thanks, Mark. I will talk to you later.
Jordan, I'll say one other thing. I appreciate all of that. Certainly. I hope you know that we appreciate you jumping on the Clemson post-game show. And so whatever you guys are doing over there, just stay at it. And I hope you know that there's no pressure for you to or feel obligated to jump on those post-game shows, but you are more than welcome to produce any type of content or jump on the post-game shows and be part of that as much as you would like. So I just hope that you know that.
Yeah, thank you. And I've been having a lot of fun doing it too. So, I really appreciate the opportunity. It's fun to just, talk college football and with a bunch of, other Clemson fans. And so if you guys, and non-Clemson fans are welcome too, please, consider subscribing to all the team channels. Go to check out the Clemson channel. We do a lot of Clemson pregame and postgame shows. So those are also really, really cool. So, thanks, Mark. I will talk to you later.
Great call, Jordan. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate it. Our man, Jordan Bowman, loves his Clemson Tigers, but as you can tell, he can talk college football across the board, especially in the ACC. He is all over it. Absolutely. Appreciate you all being here. I got to make my picks for tomorrow. Some weeks I let that slip until, late Friday night. But we got to make some predictions, and those are on Patreon. And so as Jordan outlined, join us on Patreon. You go to patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV. And as soon as I see that email come through, I will get you the Discord link where you can talk college football 24/7, 365. You get my predictions. How much are those worth? I'll let you be the judge. Not having the best season, but with a 40-year track record, I will say, though I'm not having the best season, maybe that bodes well for the second half of the season, that to reach my standard of 60% against the spread, which I typically hit, I got to really pour it on. And so maybe the law of averages are in your favor. You also get predictions from media contributors that you see here, the Voice of College Football. Also, Steve Merrill from Wager Talk has his under the radar selection of the week. He's 5-0 going into week 6. So again, though, I think Discord is the headliner here. These guys are phenomenal. They're in there talking college football and who knows what else. And we've got college football channels all over the place talking about in the chat room. But we will be here all day on Saturday with post-game shows all over the place. So please lock it in. I will post the post-game schedule on the community page as we always do. As Jordan mentioned, please hit the notification bell to know when we go live. And we'll be here after all the primetime games, about 11:30 Eastern, Saturday night, as well as throughout the day here at the Voice of College Football. Enjoy the games. There is a phenomenal list of games at noon. Enjoy.